Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome in to week 2 of the Fantasy Football Hustle, presented by Pro Football Focus. I am your host, Brian Drake, joined as always by my main man, Dwain McFarland. Dwain, you finally unleashed on the world the monster article that is the Utilization Report at PFF.com. We've gone through a week of games now. You have to be exhausted, my friend. How are you?
I am exhausted, but I'm elated. It's fun. It's a labor of love, so it's all okay. But yeah, man, that article took me, well, in getting all the data and everything, and I've got like a structure and everything ready for it. But week 1 is just insane. So yeah, it took me about 12 hours to get all the data that I wanted and everything in there and get the whole thing written. So yeah, I missed my deadline on that one. I'm okay about deadlines. I missed that one, but it was okay. There's just a lot to get to.
Folks, and if you want to read what Dwain does every week, this is the biggest, best utilization report he's ever done. You want to head over to PFF.com, use promo code HUSTLE. Thank you so much to the hundreds of you who have already gone and used promo code HUSTLE and are saving at PFF.com. Dwain's great work. Ian Harditz, my SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio co-host Andrew Erickson has a lot of stuff up there. We're going to be touching on his waiver wire article today. Nate Yonke, you name it, it's there. Ben Brown, Kevin Cole, just so much good stuff. PFF.com, promo code HUSTLE, save the 25%. So here we are. We're getting ready for waivers. Dwain, I know we've got our high stakes team that we have to put waivers in for tonight. We had a hard-fought loss, nothing you can really do. Our squad was really good this week, but we took an L to a team that had Tyreek Hill and Amari Cooper just go nuts on us. But we'll come back. We'll fight another day.
It's a good team. That team's going to be fine. It's a really good team. And that was with Eckler really hardly doing anything. Thank goodness he scored a touchdown.
Yeah, no question about it. And what you guys are here for today is the utilization. Often duplicated. Nah, not quite. Often imitated, never duplicated. We see it all across the fantasy universe, as I like to say. There's a lot of people putting out snaps and routes run and different things like that. Nobody goes in depth as my man Dwain, and that's why whether you are a DFS player, a season-long player, a bettor, you're into props, whatever it is, you are going to find valuable data here tonight with Dwain and myself. So let's kind of just take a big picture step back. And before we go team by team, which we're going to do tonight, and hit some of the main hot topics that are going on in the world of fantasy football right now. And it didn't take long for Raheem Mostert to find his way to the IR. A knee injury will sideline the 49ers veteran for the season that just came down today. Enter top waiver claim of the week, Elijah Mitchell, the 6th rounder from Louisiana, burst onto the scene after Trey Sermon was inactive for the game. This surprise sent fantasy managers like you and I scrambling. Mitchell stepped up. He ran 19 times for 104 yards and a touchdown. He would play 64% of the snaps, but failed to record a touch on 3rd down. Now, with Sermon likely coming up to the active roster, Dwain, to fill Mostert's spot, what are our expectations for Mitchell and this backfield going forward? And then also we have to think about FAAB money to spend on Mitchell going forward.
Yeah, this is one of the toughest ones. I mean, it's obviously the biggest must add of the week because you have a back in the 49ers offense. So to get him, I think minimum you're going to have to go 35 to 50%, and then you're still not going to get him sometimes because there are going to be people that are going to go 90, 95%, on this particular player. It's tough because here's my concern, and it's funny because Fantasy Football Recon Kyle had actually sent me a DM today, and it was something I had talked about with Ian, also something I had chat about with Matt Waldman, is Sermon was a scratch for week 1, but we don't really know what the roles were. What if it was because Sermon and Mostert really played the same role? And so it was like, well, we don't need Sermon. We've got Mostert. We want Elijah Mitchell to be this, and then we want, Jermichael Hasty to be the special teams guy. So it was interesting to have a couple of other folks, that I had conversations with, kind of wondering the same thing, because we don't know for sure what Shanahan's plan was. We do know that Mostert and Sermon were working together in the preseason in those first drives. Now, a lot of things can happen in preseason. You could just say, well, they just want to get a look at Sermon, but they never used Elijah Mitchell there. Like, really, Shanahan saving Elijah Mitchell to surprise everybody? Nobody cares who the running back is on the 49ers. They know they got to defend the run. They don't really give a shit like which one it is. They just know it's going to be tough defending the run. So I don't think there's some secret ploy by Shanahan to, hide something, or it could just be a disciplinary thing. So here's my thought. That's what you're going to have to bid, and it could pay off. It's the ultimate risk reward. These are the ultimate risk reward type plays in fantasy, is Elijah Mitchell. But I'll tell you what, Drake, my favorite way to play this situation is if for some reason somebody drops Sermon, they're willing to move him for cheap. That's the player I want. And it's not that I don't want Mitchell. It's just that I know, I've got 25 managed leagues, 29, but 25 at the FFPC. I bet you I get him. He's available on every team. Every team, already looked. I bet you I get him. I own 25 teams. I bet you I land him 8 times with the bid strategy I'm going to have. There's going to be people that are going to outbid me. There's already people asking on Twitter, what's the rule if we both bid 1,000 in an FFPC? That's everything.
Wow.
Like, who gets him? Oh, well, it's a virtual coin flip. So, man, don't do that, folks.
No.
You just don't know. If we've learned anything about Kyle Shanahan in the last 3 years, it's really the toughest situation to peg. You know who gets the job and gets the roles. They're in a great offense, and it's great for your team. But knowing for sure which way they're going to go, I think Sermon's going to be involved. And it's just, man, it's a long season, Drake. Even if Mitchell blows up next week, who knows what happens? Is Sermon in 4 weeks the lead back? It could be Sermon as the lead back next week. So I think people are overreacting a little bit. I do understand wanting to be aggressive with Mitchell because he is a running back and he's on a team that we know has a great scheme and he's looked really good. And now with Mostert being gone, it definitely bumps up the stakes, but you're going to get Jeff Wilson back at some point in the year as well. And like we were talking about, Sermon's probably going to be a factor. So just remember those things, and you just have to understand what's your risk tolerance. What is your need on your team? And then you're going to have to put together your plan, and you got to live with it. And so you got to go into it sober-eyed, which is, hey, if in 3 weeks from now I can hardly even use Mitchell, I'm just going to live with it, and I've spent 70% of my FAAB. So if you've got a team that's loaded at receiver, you've got one okay running back, and your weakness is RB2, do it. Go after it. It does depend on your roster construction. If you've got a team with 4 good backs and no receivers, don't go blow everything on Mitchell. So you got to look at that.
And funny story, folks. I said this on the SiriusXM show this weekend. So I do a show Saturday afternoons and then Sunday game day, 7 to 9 p.m. If you're listening to SiriusXM, come check Andrew and I out. So my wife says we have to go out in the morning and you have to spend time with the family before you're just locked in the basement all day where I am now if you're watching on YouTube, and you have to spend time with the kids. Okay, so we go out for a walk at the lake, and then we go to Dunkin' Donuts afterwards. We get like a donut and some hot chocolate and all this stuff. I'm on my phone. My wife's like, can you get off your damn phone and pay attention to the family that's sitting in front of you? What was I doing, Dwayne, at that exact moment? Picking up Elijah Mitchell. That's right, folks. No waiver wire for this guy in his big money home league. Elijah Mitchell's already on the squad, so humble brag. Let's talk about this wide receiver position now, because, all right, the storyline is, hey, what happened to Brandon Ayuk? He was out there. We can talk about, he had a hamstring injury, but that's nonsense. He was still out there fielding punts and whatnot. Last year, he was San Fran's leading receiver. He didn't see a target on Sunday. He played less snaps than Trent Sherfield, and according to NBC's Matt Mayako, Ayuk trailed off dramatically and is, quote, still learning to be a professional. Now, at the Fantasy Football Expo that was in Canton, Ohio a few months back, I sat down with Bob Lung, who runs the event. He said to me directly at the bar, a little birdie high up in the 49ers organization was talking about how Ayuk is not ready to play, how Debo is having a great camp, and they are really down on Ayuk. And I told you that at the time. And we were kind of like, let's wait and see what happened. And it turned out Bob was dead on right.
He also said that Mostert was their starting back.
And that turned out to be
John
true.
Lynch told him, he said, no, man, Mostert's our guy. I was like, I remember having that conversation with you. I was like, Lynch was probably drunk, just like trying to have fun, with Bob. Nope, he was telling the truth.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
let's
here's
talk
the deal.
about this wide receiver situation.
You can't start Ayuk right now. You just have to leave him on the bench. The thing that's wild, and Ian brought this up on our pod, is if you have a player with a hamstring injury, why even run him out there? And then you're going to put him on special teams and have him out there returning punts. Like, why, if it's an injury, I feel like there's more to the story. The other thing is, if it was just an injury and you're like, oh, we want to have him active so we can use him in key situations, but we're going to protect him. Like, you see teams do that. You'll see teams, we've seen it through the years with guys like Julio and others, where they'll get him out there. It's 3rd down and 6. Okay, Julio Jones on the field, and then he'll come off for 3 plays. Well, when you look at it from a standpoint of 3rd down targets, 0% this past week to Brandon Ayuk. He had 0% of the targets, period. So obviously he didn't get any work, in the 3rd down passing game. But only 54% of the routes, 0% of the targets. Look, I'm a couple of weeks away from cutting him because I want to give him a shot, because just in case it really is, something to do with the hamstring. But he did so well in everything we want, Drake. Like he did well in reception perception. Matt Harmon loved him. He scored really well in some of the breakout metrics that we look at by, certain target shares you hit by certain ages, college production, all that kind of stuff. Ayuk looked, he looked good. So it's kind of weird, honestly, for this to happen. But what I'll say is you got to have him on your bench. And if you're in an 18 league, I'd be much more aggressive about cutting him, So here's the one thing I think about Drake. Samuel has already exploded. The guy that everybody thought could just take handoffs is burning people all over the field in the first game. Now, the Lions are terrible, granted. Kittle is already a great option. And you got a powerful running game. And you got the looming proposition of maybe Trey Lance playing quarterback. And no offense, he just doesn't look very good so far. Like, I start to sit here and wonder, like, what are we hoping on for Ayuk at this point? If Samuel's going to be really involved, and Kittle's going to be really involved, you're going to have a good running game. What if, even if Ayuk comes back and manages to work his way back in, like, what's he, how much value is he going to have at that point? Because really what we were projecting was, well, what if he breaks out and becomes the lead receiver for the 49ers this year? I feel less confident about that happening at this point with everything that's going on. So I'm probably going to be more aggressive than the rest of the people in the industry on how quickly I move along from Ayuk. Now, again, it depends on what's on the wire and what other news things break over the next couple of weeks. You don't have to force it if you don't need to. So we'll see where it lands, but definitely, in my opinion, a lot of negatives for Ayuk this year. And let's never forget, folks, Dante Pettis had a great ending to his rookie season. I remember I was super excited about him. Other people that I really like were excited about him. Some people weren't, some data and analytics folks were like, oh no, Dante Pettis is never going to be any good. But I just know that when I saw him finish that year, he played well. And then guess what? He got completely buried, got iced. And he was an early 2nd round pick. So Shanahan's shown a history of doing this, which scares the crap out of me.
All right, let's start going in our team-by-team breakdown here. I just want to get that off the top because it's such a high priority for folks out there. So let's go to Arizona, where Chase Edmunds and James Conner are teaming up in the backfield, and Edmunds finished the week at running back 17, 14.6 PPR points for Edmunds, 58% snap share, 4 targets. So it was what you thought you'd see from Chase Edmunds. What's the deeper analytical breakdown of this backfield, kind of upgrade, downgrade, James Conner and Chase Edmunds?
Yeah, for me, Edmunds, here's the beauty, is there was a chance that really Conner was going to come in and take over most of the work that Kenyon Drake left behind. And we didn't see that happen. You actually saw Chase Edmunds get to be, and it's kind of a weird situation because he didn't lead the team in rushing attempts. He only had 34%, but a lot of that was because Conner got carries late in the game. But he did lead this team in snaps, 58%, had 34% of the rushing attempts, but was in a route, Drake, on 78% of dropbacks. Like, wow. That's like an elite tight end number almost that you're getting from a back. Now, Kyler Murray is willing to take off a lot so the targets aren't always great, but he got 13%. I mean, if he can be 13 to 15% and handle 40% of the rushing attempts, and what's going to be an explosive offense, he handled 100% of long down and distance, handled 100% of the 2-minute offense. So he is the passing down back. He's also the starter, but he's going to give way to James Conner in short down and distance. And James Conner's there to close out games and then give him a breather every few drives. Conner had 49% of the snaps on his, himself. So they obviously had some snaps where they were on the field together. But Conner's not out there in the routes near as much. 27%, had 0% of long down and distance and 2-minute offense. So I think it's pretty clear what we have in this backfield. Edmunds, for me, gets a slight upgrade, because I was just essentially fading him at cost. And when he would slide to me, I would take him in drafts, but it was just because I wasn't for sure, like, how much of a role was James Conner going to have? If all of a sudden James Conner was getting like 60 to 70% of the rushing attempts, and those were coming at the expense of Chase Edmonds being on the field and getting more routes and things like that, that was going to be a problem for me. And that was avoided. So even though he didn't have a ton of rushing attempts, I think he's a low-end RB2.
Anything pop off in the backfield here? I know we got a ton of teams to get through. DeAndre Hopkins was DeAndre Hopkins, ran a ton of routes, caught 2 touchdowns. Kyler Murray just looks next level, man.
Kyler Murray. Well, I mean, Kyler Murray, you get 13% of the team's design rushing attempts went to him, and then he picked up another 3% on scrambles, which is low, a little bit low for him. So he's going to get about 20% of the team's rushing attempts every week. So anytime you get a quarterback like that, that's an instant floor. 20% of the team's rushing, and then you get passing on top of that. Those are the quarterbacks that you really want to target and own in fantasy football. And then obviously Kyler's really good at it. As far as the receivers go, let's just talk about one. It's Christian Kirk. Only out there for 66% of the routes, but was actually the leader on the team of players that played at least 60% of the routes and a targets per route run, which is 22%. So targets per route run just means it's a way to level people, right? Because you're only counting folks for the routes they were on the field where the quarterback could have thrown it to them. And so 22% was the leader on the team. Hopkins was 20%. AJ Green was 19%. And so here's the thing I love about Kirk. They led in this game 84% of the plays. So in the second half, they just didn't have to use Drake a lot of 11 and 10 personnel and things like that. And the Cardinals, their main sets are 11, 10, and 12. So 11 is 3 wide receivers, 10 is 4 wide receivers, 12 is 2 wide receivers with 2 tight ends. And so in the second half, they went more to 12 personnel, but it's because they were leading. So if you look at that first half, about 70% of their plays were in 10 or 11 personnel. In the second half, 33% is all that were 10 and 11. So if you look at that and Kirk, here's the other data point, was the leading slot receiver. 96% of his routes came from the slot, and he was on the field way more than Rondale Moore, almost doubled him up nearly in routes. So when I see all that, what it tells me is that when they're in more competitive games and they use more 10 and 11 personnel, we're probably going to see his routes up around like 75%. He led the team in end zone targets, 40%, led the team in third down targets, 33%. I really think Hopkins is the 1, and I think Christian Kirk is the 2 in this offense, playing the slot, and he's a must-add in every single league. 12-team leagues, he's a must-add in 12-team leagues. I'll say that. In 10-team leagues, you may have to make a decision. You get down into 8-team leagues, you may already have enough receivers that you just can't make any room for Christian Kirk. But I think, remember, Kirk last year was outside. Only 16% of his routes came from the slot last year. Now he's up to 96%. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. The example I gave is, look, he's essentially what people were going to hope Laviska Shenault was going to be. He's an explosive player, only going to be out there about 70% of the routes, but he's going to be in a way better offense. So if you like Laviska Shenault in the 6th or 7th round of a draft, you should love Christian Kirk as a free agent.
Christian Kirk is available in 15%, or he's only rostered, in 15% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. So if that's the case in Yahoo, you can see that going on around the rest of the apps. Let's go to the Atlanta Falcons now. I watched pretty much every play of this game. It was not good for Arthur Smith's debut in Atlanta. Mike Davis, he was fine. He, played 75% of the snaps. What I really liked about this game from an Atlanta aspect is Cordarrelle Patterson. And that you might say, wait, there's Calvin Ridley, there's Kyle Pitts, and that's all well and good. We know those guys are going to be fine. Cordarrelle Patterson getting a quarter of their rushing attempts and is really, to me, and the eyeball test, look like the better running back. If you have a deep bench, keep an eye on Cordarrelle Patterson, because if Mike Davis breaks down again, this guy is going to get major run in this offense, and we can catch the football out of the backfield.
Yeah, and running back's probably the best bet for Patterson. I think he struggles conceptually with the game based on things I've read, and just, he's one of those players that has so many elite traits. You're like, why could this player not pull it together? But he just never could, So I think it's a good call out. The only thing I would really say about the Falcons is if you can go buy low on Kyle Pitts, you absolutely should. He finished his tight end 22. It might have gotten a little lower last night. That's before the Monday night rankings were calculated in when I wrote this, but was in a route, Drake, on 80% of the dropbacks. So thresholds to think about. We'll talk about them through the whole episode. For tight end, if you can be 80% or over as far as the times you're in a route versus the number of times the team passes or a quarterback drops back to pass. So it's not just pass attempts. It's actually they drop back to pass. They could have scrambled. They could have got sacked. There's a lot of things that could happen when you drop back to pass. But at the end of the day, you just want that number to be 70% or better for a tight end is what you need to start a tight end. When you get to 80%, you're really getting up into elite territory. You get to 90%, that's like super rarefied air. And so Pitts hit the 80% mark in his rookie debut, saw 22% of the targets, only second to Calvin Ridley, who had 25%, and targets per route run, 20%. That's the other important number that I already talked about. So if you go back and you look at tight ends, and I put a similar tweet out about TJ Hawkinson like this, you get to 80% of the routes, you get to 20% of the targets per route run. If he can hold that, things could change. This is 1 week. We're going off of one data point, but it's all we have. And you want to be aggressive with a player like this. If he can sustain those or keep those close to that, he's going to have a really big year. He's going to have a big year. I know it didn't show through on the first game, but Kyle Pitts is really set up to have a big year. I think it might actually help him to play him more tight end and play him inside more instead of making him go up against outside cornerbacks and things like that as a receiver. It's great that that's getting him on the field. That's one thing to consider that could hold him down a little bit is the way that they're using him. Those can be tougher matchups at times, but I'm super excited about what I saw with Kyle Pitts. And if you drafted him high, you may be like, oh man, here we go. Rookie's going to bust. I would hold the line on Pitts if I own him. If I'm not the owner, I'm trying everything I can to go get him and, just kind of peddling that story. Well, it's hopefully the owner that you're trying to trade with, right, is like, well, crap, I should have known better. A rookie tight end can't break out, blah, blah, blah.
I'm excited to talk about this team next right here. We're going to skip over Baltimore because they were the Sunday night game. And then we didn't have the data for that at the time.
Just real quick on that, you got Tyson handling the first half. Latavius Murray really took over in the second half.
Yeah.
So something happened there that the coaches saw that they didn't like. I don't know what it is, but there was really a chance for Tyson to take over the backfield. Apparently that didn't happen. So we're just going to kind of have to chill out with it. I still expect him to be the more used back, Drake. Over Latavius Murray. But what this most likely means is we're back to the same kind of committee situation that we would have seen with Dobbins. We would have seen with Gus Edwards and Dobbins. We would have seen with Gus Edwards and Tyson Williams. Look, the Ravens just like to do this. It's their MO. We've talked about it for years. So I think that's the big thing when you look at the Ravens. The only other thing is Mark Andrews, man. Dude, I'm telling you, this is going to be the best year for tight ends we have seen. I need to go back and look, but my bet is in the last 20 years. I think we're going to have 7 to 8 tight ends scoring huge. I don't want to say huge, but really good numbers. Normally you get 3 and then it's a complete cliff. Man, we'll talk about some more as we go. We've already talked about Kyle Pitts, but Mark Andrews was out there last night for over 90% of the routes, Drake. He's always been stuck in the 60s and 70s. If he keeps that up, it's going to be a really good season for Mark Andrews.
Yeah, and Hollywood Brown looked fantastic also.
He always looked great week 1.
Yeah, another game with double-digit PPR points. He's a guy that was going real late in drafts. You could get him for nothing. All right, on to Buffalo, where Sunday the Bills allowed the most plays with pressure, which is 27 in the NFL week 1, which led to Josh Allen throwing an NFL high 9 off-target incompletions. Last year, Buffalo threw 71 off-target incompletions all year. So in one game, Buffalo produced nearly 13% of those same bad throws that they had all of last year. again, in just one game. So it looked much more like 2019 Josh Allen than 2020 Josh Allen. And that's to take nothing away from a very good Steelers defense. Buffalo just kind of looked off. Zach Moss was a healthy scratch. We had Devin Singletary coming in and out of the lineup. We had a little shoulder issue for a minute. The Bills went 5 wide the entire opening drive with Isaiah McKenzie playing running back. So let's get into this Bills offense. And Dwayne, they just can't run the football. 11 attempts for Devin Singletary. Like, to me,
they don't want to. They don't care.
Like, at some point, though, doesn't this offense just become like the defenses figure out what you're going to do? And it's not like they have all these great receivers. They have one really good receiver, and then everybody else is like, okay, you're fine. But if Josh Allen can't be accurate with the football, aren't they going to get figured out after a while? Like, at some point, they have to run the ball.
But I think their plan is they let Allen run the ball. I mean, Allen had 30% of the design rush attempts for the team, and he didn't even scramble that often this week. So
that's a ton. That's going to get killed.
It's a huge number. It's an absolute huge number. It's old Cam Newton-esque, is really what it is. But look, man, the Steelers shut down the Bills last year. I had Josh Allen outside of my elite smash tier this weekend for starting. And I had a bunch of people rip me. Oh, my God, where's Josh Allen on the list? I'm like, dude, just go look what happens whenever he gets pressured, especially by a team like the Steelers. Like, it's tough for any quarterback, and Josh Allen is human. So I chalked this up to you really played a good defense, and people just thought that, Josh Allen could overcome anything. Well, he didn't overcome this defense even last year. It was one of his worst games of the season in 2020. But that's really it, man. You don't really want to deal with this running back field because of all the things you said. I mean, Singletary handled 48. Singletary is actually a decent receiver. The problem is Allen doesn't want to throw to the backs. He either wants to push the ball down the field or he wants to take off. So it's hard for Singletary. It's hard for whoever the back is here because you're not going to score touchdowns. Allen's going to steal them. You're not going to get a lot of rushing attempts because they don't want to run it, and Allen's going to get part of the attempts. And then in the passing game, there's just not a lot of checkdowns. I mean, he had 9% of the targets, 10% targets per route run. He was in a route 70% of the time. That's elite, but they're just not looking at him. He's the opposite of Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's in a route 40% of the time, and he gets targeted on like 35% of his routes run. So that's where these things, there's nuance, right? And that's why I'm really this year trying to focus on helping people understand, like, for each position, like, where's the intersection of when you see these two things come together, historically, what does that mean from a utilization perspective? And what kind of a finish are we going to see from a fantasy football perspective if we just go back, and look at, similar players that profiled in a similar situation. And if I can, like, had similar traits, but I'm really mostly worried about, are they going to get similar type touches in utilization?
Let's go to a question here from our good friend Shirley. Would you drop Singletary for Kenny Gainwell, or drop him to try to get, or that's another different question, or drop to try to get Devonta Smith or Kirk? If Devonta Smith is on your waiver wire, 100%.
Yeah, I would drop Singletary for Devonta Smith or Christian Kirk. Gainwell, if you're needing an RB2, Singletary's still your safer play. But if you've got a wide receiver 2, and let's say you've already got a James White on your team as your RB3, then I like Gainwell because I feel like Gainwell gives you more upside than what Singletary does. But I'm definitely dropping Singletary for Devonta Smith or Christian Kirk, assuming that I'm good on running backs.
Hey, Dwayne, guess who the RB1 is after 1 week? It's Christian McCaffrey. Who would have thought the guy who was the 101 in all the drafts this summer came out and smashed week 1, 27.7 PPR points, played nearly 90% of the snaps in what was kind of a boring game for Carolina. So let's just kind of talk about Sammy Darnold, his first game starting for the Carolina Panthers against his old Jets, who are just a dumpster fire. Wait till we get to them. So, I mean, we don't have to talk about CMC. Anything interesting from their wide receiver group?
Yeah. DJ Moore, 92% of the routes, 24% of the targets, 24% targets per route run. It looks really good for him, man. 11.4 ADOT instead of having to be like 15 or 18, just running coverages off. In fact, it was the opposite. It was what we thought last year would be. Robbie Anderson was the guy running the routes down the field. He and Moore still tied an air yard percentage for the team at 34%. Anderson's still going to be involved, but I think Moore is just cast in a much better role for his skill set now, Drake. I think he did an admirable job last season, really being more of a deep threat. But now I think there's just so many more elements of his game, that are uncorked with the way that they're going to use him. I didn't think Sam Darnold looked great, but I also didn't think that he looked bad, Drake. And I mean, again, it was another game where there were a lot of games like this that were completely lopsided. So they never trailed the whole game. I mean, so they were leading 59% of snaps, and if they weren't leading, the game was within 41% of the snaps. So they were either in a game that was within 3 points or they were leading. So they never felt like they just had to force everything from a passing perspective. The one other player I'll call out is Terrace Marshall Jr. I continue to stay on he's this year's Chase Claypool bandwagon, 65% of the routes. But again, they led a lot, so they were able to use more 12 personnel, didn't have to use quite as much 11. But remember last year with Claypool, oh man, he's only getting 65, 70%. And guess who was saying, oh man, Dwain. But when you dig deeper, targets per route run, 25%, better than DJ Moore. So when he was out there, he was getting targeted. Dude, Drake, he had 50% of the end zone targets. He had 50% of the third down targets.
Wow.
When your quarterback's targeting you on third down that much and targeting you in the end zone, guess what? He trusts you. So I feel good about Terrace Marshall. Yes, I know Sam Darnold, not a great quarterback, but let's remember, folks, Teddy Bridgewater also not a great quarterback, and he was able to support 3 receivers in the top 36, in an offense last year. So let's give Sam Darnold a chance. Terrace Marshall needs to be rostered in pretty much every single format. You don't have to start him yet, but he's the kind of guy you want to have just sitting there. And if for some reason, Drake, Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore went down, oh my gosh, like Terrace Marshall is going to be rookie of the year.
You had a tweet during the Bears game Sunday night giving effusive praise to David Montgomery. He's a guy, we've been down on for a while. I mean, this Bears team is bad. I don't know how much.
I didn't tweet. That was a text to you. And by the way, guys, so Drake was talking to me.
There was a tweet. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It was a text to you, but it's still all right. I had been working all day, and I had this weird thing, and all of a sudden, like all my vision, like just basically like crossed, and it was this right eye. And so I had to like just take a break. I couldn't do the podcast with Ian. I couldn't read anything. So I just literally had to go lay down, and my wife was reading about it, but I was laying in bed. And I could still it finally started to get better, and I could watch the TV, and I couldn't see great, but I could see good enough to know that, I think I screwed up on David Montgomery. Yeah. Because that's what I texted you. I was like, I can't see well right now, but I can see well enough to know that I was wrong on David Montgomery.
Yeah. I mean, we know that Andy Dalton's going to be out soon. I'd be fine if they got rid of Nagy soon too, but Montgomery looks okay. That line is shoddy. The tackles are real bad. He's just getting beat up back there. Damien Williams looked pretty good too. So if he's out there available on your waiver wire, I think in a pinch, you could put him in your lineup, and he's going to be a top priority handcuff. What else do you think about the backfield here? Absolutely nothing going on because the Rams just shut down this air offense. And, by the way, Andy Dalton sucks.
Yeah, there's nothing to talk about with receivers. If you have Allen Robinson, you're going to use him. If you have David Montgomery on the team, you're going to use him.
Yeah.
Montgomery was on pace, Drake, to be like 75% of the attempts. He left the game for I don't know how many drives, 1.5 drives probably. So Montgomery is a guy that now the thing that concerned me, only 3% of the targets, 5% targets per route run. That all went to Damien Williams. Damien Williams had 13% of the targets. 25% of the time he was in a route, he was targeted. So Montgomery needs to hit the long runs. He needs to score the rushing touchdowns. I'm still worried about his utilization in the passing game, which is what we thought might be something that would help him early in the season, but it's kind of already gone. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, but he did look good from a running back perspective. He wasn't just hitting wide open holes. He was actually creating things. But yeah, the Bears, man, it looks bad. It's what you said. They just need to move on. I mean, Andy Dalton, good God, dude. 4.5 ADOT, 5.4 yards per attempt. I mean, what the hell? Like, you're just such a wimpy offense.
Yeah, it's terrible. They look like a team that's stuck in neutral. I think I tweeted that out. Like, nothing about them challenges the defense. It just the Bears stink. A team hopefully turning the corner is the Cincinnati Bengals. And boy, oh boy, Dwain, I know there's a lot of talk on Twitter about victory laps. If you could take a 1-week victory lap, Joe Mixon, you would be riding on his shoulders this week, Dwain. 78% of the snaps, just crushing it, running the football, 29 carries, 4 targets. He was out there 23 passing snaps, 25 PPR points. Joe Mixon looking like the full, 3-down beast that we've been craving all these years in Cincinnati.
Yeah. And no, Shirley, do not sell high on Mixon. This is, you want Joe Mixon this year. Like, as long as with Gio Bernard, it's not a hard equation. Gio Bernard's gone. Joe Mixon played 100% of the 2-minute offense. He never got the 2-minute offense when Gio was around. That's all he needed. 100% of the short down and distance, 100% of the carries inside the 5, 22% targets per route run. That's elite. That's elite. That's not just okay. In a route, 55% of the plays, 81% of the rushing attempts. This is what everyone hopes for. This is what you draft in the top 5 picks of a fantasy draft, is what you have in Joe Mixon right now. The only reason you would sell high on Joe Mixon would be because you think he's going to get hurt. Guess what? Anyone could get hurt. There's no way I'm selling Joe Mixon. I love it. He allowed you to take a receiver in the first round, an elite one, come back, nail Joe Mixon. Hopefully you got DeAndre Swift in the 4th, and you sandwiched another great receiver in there in the 3rd, or a tight end, and you're in a great shape right now. Like, you crushed the first 4 rounds of your draft if you did something like that. So Joe Mixon, yeah, man. I mean, I didn't feel like it. It is weird. You feel like you need to take a victory lap, but like, I feel like it's just common sense that Joe Mixon, more people should have been on him this year, and he just shouldn't have been pushed so far down towards the end of the 2nd round.
Hey, did you know Jamar Chase can still catch? What do you know? Finished his PPR wide receiver 15, 7 targets, caught 5 balls for 101 and a long touchdown. Look good out there. Again, this is the kid's first game. He took a year off and he played as a sophomore. So he's a very young kid trying to learn the wide receiver position in the NFL.
Yeah. And this is, again, another example of certain news you don't give a shit about in the preseason. If some beat reporter tells you Joe Mixon's dropping the ball, it doesn't matter. Drops are not sticky, folks. People lose confidence. People go through streaks. Jamar Chase is a great player, and so hopefully you got to buy the dip. And I'm glad that this happened, because like, he was going in the 4th round, which was like, okay, that's pretty expensive compared to all the other receivers that you could take in that round, because everybody was so high on the Justin Jefferson glue from the year before. There's just really getting expectations kind of crazy. But yeah, I'm good with Jamar Chase, good with T. Higgins. Tyler Boyd could be in a little bit of trouble here. If T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are really ascending, right, and they're going to be these 2 talented players, let's be honest, folks. Tyler Boyd's a good player. He's not a great player. He gets to operate in the slot. That helps him. I'm not downgrading him yet, but if I were to continue to see this for a couple more weeks, it's something that I start to get concerned about, because Chase and Higgins do both look really good.
Hopefully the game script helps Tyler Boyd a little more. And it's not games where the Bengals are going to run the ball down people's throats, and they have to throw it a lot more. I
mean, the thing is, Boyd was out there 85% of the routes. I mean, it's just, yeah, that is the hope, but man, that 15% target rate and 14% targets per route run, and those stats move up and down every week, right? These are not predictive, like week to week. Like, we need to get a few weeks in and kind of see like what these averages look like for these players. So, I mean, I'm not telling people to don't go drop Tyler Boyd or freak out. It's just, I'm a little worried. These slot guys that live on thinner margins than we think. We talk about them as high floor players, but I mean, if their targets aren't coming, you're screwed, because they're not scoring touchdowns. So they have to get that 20% target share to continue to hold value. I do think the Bengals will slowly start to pass more as the year goes on. But if they're winning running the ball, I think there's a chance we see a little bit more balance this year.
The Browns were without Odell Beckham this week, who is kind of a surprise inactive. Baker Mayfield showed kind of who Baker Mayfield is. He's not elite. He's good. He's okay. Threw for 300 yards, as you put in your article, but he just can't get the ball in the end zone. The Browns did have 2 top 12 PPR running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So, I mean, if you have those guys, you're starting them all the time. I know there's a lot of teams out there that drafted both. And for some reason, I just never understood that because of the price.
I still don't like it.
Hunt.
I just still don't like it.
Yeah.
You're limiting your weekly upside every week. I mean, you're playing for a floor. is the way I feel. And I just don't like to play for a floor. Not with how high you had to take both of those players, but hey, to each his own. Maybe that's going to be the league winner. So I don't think we really need to talk about Chubb and Hunt much. I mean, people know, look, Hunt gets all the passing down work. He still does. Chubb gets the early down work. He still does. The tricky part is Hunt sneaks in there and steals these short down and distance snaps too. He had 75% of them versus 25% for Nick Chubb. So he also gets in there inside the 5. So that's the most annoying part, is that Kareem Hunt's not just a receiving back. They'll pull Chubb off and put Hunt in the game to score the touchdown. And so that's kind of annoying. Like Nick Chubb's, for you Nick Chubb owners, don't get me wrong, I love Nick Chubb, one of my favorite backs in the league. But you got lucky that he squeezed out the 2 touchdowns because this is a game script that you don't want to see for Nick Chubb, right? So when you look up and you see that the Browns trail 67% or trail 15%, of the game, and they had to pass 67%. Those are the sort of things, and they know that they've got the Chiefs pushing them because the rest of the game was really close. 43% of the plays were within 3 points. It's just, it can be tough, on Chubb. It could have been a lot worse because at least the game wasn't something where the Chiefs led until late. Oh, Donovan Peoples-Jones, you guys can cut him. If for some reason you're in a deep league and you're holding him, he got his chance. 3% targets per route run. That's atrocious. When OBJ's back, DPJ's done. And maybe he improves as the year goes on, but there's really no reason to clog up your roster with him.
We got a question about Austin Hooper from our good pal Matthew Miles.
Cut. 40. This is a 3-way rotation. Great question, Matthew. 3-way rotation. Austin Hooper, 42% of the routes. David Njoku, 55% of the routes. Harrison Bryant, 27% of the routes. 10%, 17%, and 7% respectively in target shares for Hooper and Njoku and Bryant. It's just a mess. We talked about what you want. You want a guy up towards 80% and seeing a target over 20% of the routes run. 42% routes with a 20% targets per route run means cut the player immediately, and we'll talk about some guys you can pick up instead.
Ezekiel Elliott, a lot of folks talking about him, and he finished the week at running back 40 in PPR, 5.9 points. It's going to frustrate fantasy owners, no matter who you are. If you're playing him in a showdown slate or you have him in season long, it's not great. We get it. And now you've got Lyle Collins. I believe he's going to miss 5-6 games, Dwayne, with a suspension. It's a lot of this, Dwayne. Do you think it's game script? It's just the Cowboys are always losing, but you have some good utilization stats about, the fact that he's out there, he's getting targets, he's not really sharing. People are thinking, oh, Tony Pollard's taken over, but you say, at least in your best Lee Corso impression, not so fast, my friends.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke's still out there. I gave the advice to fade Zeke, but now people are just going overboard. I just didn't want to take Zeke in the first round. People I was watching main event drafts last weekend after the Thursday night game where Zeke was sliding into the third round. Like, that's an overreaction from some of the best people on the planet at drafting fantasy football teams. It's really funny to me. Handled 83% of the snaps, 73% of the rushing attempts, 72% of the routes, 100% of the short down and distance, 100% of the inside the 5 attempts, 86% of the long down and distance, 94% of the 2-minute snaps. And then I still hear people, well, Tony Pollard's the better back. He's going to force his way on the field. Tony Pollard may be the better back, but he's not forcing his way on the field right now. Like, Zeke's being paid a lot of money. The coaching staff loves Zeke. The owner loves Zeke. Unless Zeke gets hurt, Tony Pollard probably is just not going to be a thing this season. Tony Pollard got scripted some plays early in the game, and then as soon as the game really got into a shootout, it's like the coaches even forgot Tony Pollard existed. He was hardly on the field anymore. And again, Pollard is a good player. I get it. I like him. I get to watch him all the time. But right now, I mean, this is still Zeke's show. Look, only 4% of the targets, only a target on 4% of the routes run by Zeke. But I think part of that, Drake, is really just this offense. They're going to push it down the field. They got 3 really good receivers. Now you got Gallup, who's going to be out. So, I mean, you could see a little bit more for Elliott. But still, you have Lamb and Cooper. 2 really good receivers is enough. So there doesn't have to be a lot going to the backs. But Zeke's going to get more than 4% of the targets. Like, when you're on a route, 72% of the dropbacks by a quarterback, you're going to get more than 4% of the targets. He just didn't get them this past week. Zeke's a great buy low candidate. If you got an owner that's really bummed out and And honestly, Drake, it's the perfect scenario because there were some other big people in the industry saying to fade Zeke in the first round. So then when he doesn't have this game, and then people think, man, these guys were saying to fade him, it like does a psychological trick to where it's all of a sudden like, holy shit, like Zeke's not worth anything. And so you get this really depressed value on him. And you might be able to sneak him off of another team and think, man, you get Zeke on your team as your RB2 and you're still good at receiver and some other area. I mean, you're going to be fine.
People often forget about the Thursday night games for injuries, but we lost Michael Gallup. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks, somewhere between 3 and 5. We don't know yet. So enter Cedric Wilson, enter Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin still out there. I kind of liked what I saw from Dalton Schultz. I don't know if I'd be rostering Cedric Wilson at this point. Maybe it's just more for Amari and CD and Zeke, but
that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's going to go more to Amari and to CeeDee Lamb. Now, look, you got an offense that ran 84 plays. That's including penalties. 82% of the time they threw the ball. So, yeah, Cedric Wilson should be rostered in 12-team formats. You start getting down into 10 and 8. I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as some people do. I think he could be okay. You want to throw a flyer on him and just see what happens. But the problem is you're going to get Gallup back in like 4 or 5 weeks. So don't get crazy with your fab dollars on Cedric Wilson. It's kind of early in the year just to feel like, oh, my God, I need somebody to plug in my offense. I feel like if we were in week 7 and this had happened, I'd probably be like, man, yeah, throw 5% on Cedric Wilson. Let him get you through the bye weeks. Let him get you through these injuries. But we're early enough in the season where there's other things you can get. You still don't know enough about your roster to be dropping guys that you drafted sooner for someone like Cedric Wilson. The big thing I would say with CeeDee Lamb is once Gallup got hurt, and he was out of the game. I mean, CeeDee Lamb was out there 100% of the routes. So, Lamb's going to explode at this point. You already saw Amari explode. They both can be wide receiver ones every week as long as Gallup is out.
Heartbreak for Jerry Jeudy owners as the second-year wide receiver suffered a bad high ankle injury that will cost him 6 to 8 weeks. So we have to unpack a lot here with Denver. First, what do we do with Judy if we don't have an IR? And then are we looking at Tim Patrick? Are we looking at KJ Hamler? Cortland Sutton should see a big uptick in targets. I mean, it can't get any worse. He had 3 targets and he caught 1 ball for 14 yards. And then we'll get to the running backs after that. But initial take on Jerry Jeudy.
Man, it really depends on your league. Depends on how deep your rosters are. If you're in an 8-team or a 10-team league that doesn't – I'm sorry, my chair keeps making all this noise. I have to get a new one. But
I just punched the microphone, so we're professionals here.
Yeah. So with Judy, if you're in an 8-team league with shallow benches, you can cut him and move on. But there's got to be something – here's why. In those leagues, there's going to be a lot of other players out there that you like.
Yep.
So it goes both ways, right? The deeper the rosters. So if there's a 20-team roster and a 20-team league, 20-player rosters, one, there's nothing out there to drop Jerry Jeudy for, most likely. And then B, you really are going to probably need him again later in the season because all these other players, because you're playing in a deeper league, that may start more flex spots and all that stuff anyway. So you have to understand all of those elements. So if you know there's something worthy of going for, don't ask me should I drop Jerry Jeudy to pick up Cedric Wilson? No. Should I drop Jerry Jeudy because Elijah Mitchell is there? Yeah, you could probably do that. Should I drop Jerry Jeudy because Christian Kirk is there? You might do that. But outside of that, there's probably not a lot of guys you're going to want to drop, Jerry Jeudy for. I do know that I've read a decent amount on it, and everybody seems pretty skeptical that he's going to, that it looked like a bad enough high ankle injury that it could really be a while. It may not be the normal 4 to 6 weeks. This could really be more of a 8 to 10 week thing, because it was very severe. So even though it ended up being high ankle, which was okay, great, this is a good thing, there's still very serious injuries.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind.
I want nothing to do with guys with these high ankle sprains. And look at Jerry Jeudy. He's a technician out there. He's a guy that wants to cut. He wants to use sudden movements. We've seen this with, the Michael Thomases and just any receiver who gets a high ankle sprain or a running back. I don't want him anymore. If I'm in even a 12-team league and I hear this guy's going to be out 8-10 weeks, I'm okay with dropping him because to me, I'm now clogging up my bench. Or before I drop him, you know what I'll do? Let me see if I can just throw a trade offer out there. There's always a guy in your league that's looking to trade. Yeah, we're all in those leagues. If you can get something for him because the guy thinks, oh, I'll hang on to Jerry Jeudy till the playoffs, great. Give me a guy that I can play for the next 8-9 weeks and actually get me to the playoffs. How about in the backfield now, Dwain? The debate over this backfield wasn't if Melvin Gordon was dead, but what time is the funeral? He was supposed to ride off into the mile-high sunset and give way to rookie Javonte Williams, but Gordon actually performed okay, I guess. He split snaps with Williams and broke off a 70-yard run. Williams did carry 14 times for 45 yards. What do you see from this backfield and thoughts on it going forward?
I think it was great that Javonte forced an even split, like right out of the way. I mean, right out of the gate, you force that. And we know that rookies can grow their role over the course of the year. What you don't want to see is, oh my God, Melvin Gordon 70% and Javonte Williams 30%. I can't even use a guy I drafted in the 5th or 4th round of my draft. Javonte Williams is usable right now. So I think it's a positive for him. You know, Melvin Gordon played good. He had that long run. Gordon's still handling a little more of the passing downs, targeted more targets per route run, 16% versus 7%, and a route 46% versus 37%. But to your point, like, it's almost dead even. So anytime something's close to dead even, Drake, what do you want? I want to own the younger player. So I think this is a good sign overall for Javonte Williams. And there's a chance it just stays like it is and the Broncos continue to play well. But if I had to put odds on which back is going to earn, if one of them is going to be likely to earn more time, I think it's going to be, Javonte Williams cutting more into what Melvin Gordon has.
All right, you guys listen to the Fantasy Football Hustle podcast. I am Brian Drake alongside Dwain McFarland. Follow us on Twitter. The show is at FF Hustle. I am at Drake Fantasy. Dwain is at Dwain McFarland. Also, go check out our TikTok page. We haven't done anything yet, but you can follow it at FF Hustle. Same thing with our Instagram. Go check that out and see some of the stuff we're posting over there. Wow, this is going to be interesting. Who would have thought after week 1 the Detroit Lions would have the number 3 and number 4 running backs in PPR scoring? We were told Jamal Williams was going to carry the, get ready for the bad pun, Lions share for Detroit in this game. Well, that didn't last long as DeAndre Swift outsnapped him 63-32 on his way to 11 rushes and 11 targets. Williams did have 9 carries and 9 targets himself. You had a tremendous stat, Dwain, about Swift's usage the other night. It was about PPR between 67%. Do you have that pulled up?
Yeah. So again, this is where the intersection of these things come together. So if you look back since 2011, and what's the cheat code, folks, at running back?
Catching passes.
Catching passes in PPR and in half PPR. If you look back to players in the backfield with 60 to 70%. So that's me capping it because there are players that get 80 and these weird numbers. But just saying, hey, if you got between 60 and 70% of the routes, you had Swift at 65% this past week, and you got at least 40% of the attempts. Because that's me thinking through, what if in a better game script, Jamal Williams actually gets the ball a little bit more, right? He's the A back. What if he got 60% and Swift got 40, even though Swift did outsnap him? But that's just me kind of trying to give a little bit of leeway here. But if you had over 40%, of the attempts, and you had between 60 and 70% of the routes since 2011, here's your PPR finishes for those backs: 16, 3, 4, 5, 9, 1, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 9, 3, 1.
That sounds good.
DeAndre Swift, he's gonna have a good season, even if he's not a great running back. Like, they don't have anyone else. They're gonna throw the ball to him. He may not be Alvin Kamara as a pass receiver, but you know what he is? He's the best thing they have outside of TJ Hawkinson. So he's going to be used. I still expect Jamal Williams to be used as well. I mean, only 35% of the snaps, but he got 43% of the rushing attempts, 31% of the routes. But on those routes, he was targeted on 41% of those routes. So if you think about it, you have Hawkinson, you got DeAndre Swift, and you have Jamal Williams. Those are the best 3 players on offense. I think they're going to figure out how to continue to feed them. And we talked about this way back. Remember when we did we were going through projections for all the teams? We talked about there being a scenario where really it's 20% or more of the targets, to Hawkinson. And then, 20 to 30% of these targets to the backs. Like you could literally have 50% of your targets going to like the backs and Hawkinson. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, so that's really where we are. I like both players. I would say if I could sell Jamal Williams high as the RB2 of the week, abso-freaking-lutely, I would do it. And here's why. I think Swift, his value is much more insulated in these crappy scripts, which we're probably going to see a lot of from the Lions. He handled 91% of the long down and distance, 82% of the 2-minute offense. So when they want to be throwing the ball or when they are forced to throw the ball because game scripts are bad, this is DeAndre Swift. That's his role. Jamal Williams was 100% of the attempts inside the 5, 60% of the short down and distance snaps versus 40% for Swift. So Williams, it's really what we were told. He's the A back. Swift's the B back. If you look at the coaches that quoted that, the B back that Dan Campbell would have came from was Alvin Kamara. The B back that Anthony Lynn would have came from the Chargers to come over and be the coordinator would have been Austin Eckler. And that's exactly how we're seeing them use Swift. So, and Swift is not as good as really either of those players. But again, it just really doesn't matter because they don't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah. These wide receivers here, I'm not interested really in any of these guys. You're never going to want to play them. Let me go back quickly, if I can jump back one team. A lot of folks asking Patrick versus Hamler. If you had to pick one, I think I'm going to go with Tim Patrick. We've seen him with a nose for the end zone. He's just a good NFL receiver. I'm surprised a team like New Orleans didn't trade for him in the offseason.
Imagine the Chiefs with like Tim Patrick. Yeah, Tim Patrick will be the guy because he plays inside and out. So I expect him to be on the field more than KJ Hamler. Hamler was only out there for 49% of the routes this last week. I don't think that changes a lot. I think he's the slot receiver. Now in the game, it wasn't a situation where, you had the Broncos trailing, a ton. They trailed 23% of snaps. The game was within 3 points, 53% of the snaps. They led 38%. So kind of an even game for them. And you only saw Hamler out there for right at 50% of the routes. I don't think that goes up a lot. I think what you're going to see is Tim Patrick up around the 80% routes. I think Cortland Sutton takes another step forward next week, probably bumps up to around 90% of the routes. I expect Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant to lead this team in the receiving department with the absence of Jerry Jeudy. And then I would say Tim Patrick is your third, KJ Hamler is your fourth. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like this video, comment, let us know how your team did week 1. Let us know any players you want to hear about utilization-wise. Just leave that in the comments for us. We want to get a little more interaction going here on this YouTube page. So, hit that bell. Real quick on Detroit, Hawkinson hit 80% of the routes. Got over 20% targets per route run. I'm just going to say TPRR. So again, I think this is a huge year for tight ends. Yeah. So Hawkinson, I tweeted about that so you guys can go back and look at it, but it was a similar type of stat to what I just gave you around the backs. When tight ends hit those numbers, and again, they have to hold them. But Hawkinson was only at 73% of the routes per drop back last season. He's already at an 80% in week 1 this year. So I really feel good about him. And again, he's the best receiver that they have. This was a burn the tape game for the Green Bay Packers. I don't think we have to talk about anything in it because there's really nothing useful that came out of this game. One thing I would say is a lot of people are worried about Aaron Jones, and I feel obligated since I had him as my RB4 just to talk about him. Because I own him a lot, so I also felt if you guys have been following me and you drafted Aaron Jones, I was just as concerned when I saw the box score, so I had to go dig in and figure out what's going on. So, number one, he didn't play in the fourth quarter because the game was out of hand. Neither did Aaron Rodgers, neither did Devontae Adams. So here is what it looked like, though, for Aaron Jones through 3 quarters. 74% of the snaps through the first 3 quarters. When did you see that from Aaron Jones before? Never. Handling 63% of the rushing attempts. When did you see that for Aaron Jones before? Never. 57% of the routes. When did you see that from Aaron Jones before? Never. 12% of the targets, 18% targets per route run, 50% of the long down and distance work. Aaron Jones had 100% of the 2-minute offense. Wow. Prediction. Who gave that prediction? Same guy who's talking about Joe Mixon doing the exact same thing. But seriously, so Aaron Jones is a great buy low. If somebody looks at this kind of thing, they're like, geez, Kylan Hill's out there. A.J. Dillon's playing. Aaron Jones played half the snaps. Oh, my God. And most people got to draft Aaron Jones at the end of the first or in the second. He's a fabulous buy low candidate. You should be all over it. What this data tells me is Aaron Jones is about to have an Alvin Kamara season. That's where I'm at on it. A.J. Dillon is still going to get some carries. But like I said, all preseason, he's not going to get the 2-minute offense that Jamal Williams leaves behind. And this is where I think you really do have to kind of look at football and study football. I know some people are like, well, it's more data or it's more football. I think that's where the blend comes in, is just looking at the roles, and what Aaron Jones can do in the receiving game is very different than A.J. Dillon. Yes, can A.J. Dillon catch a football? Yes. Can he run the same routes as Aaron Jones? No. Can A.J. Dillon even do what Jamal Williams did in the passing game? Maybe in a couple of years. Jamal Williams was never a great up-the-field receiver. Okay, probably better than A.J. Dillon is right now, but he was super trusted in pass pro. And so those are the sort of things you kind of got to look at. And, man, I'm elated. I know the Packers had a stinky game, but you got to relax. Aaron Rodgers, they're going to get things going. You got a good scheme. Aaron Jones is a 100%, 1,000% buy low.
How about the Houston Texans?
Can we still just skip them?
They suck. Hammer. What's that?
Can we still just skip them? They suck.
Yeah. Let me just say this. Dropping the hammer on the Jags. We'll see if Urban Meyer is coaching USC by Saturday. Tyrod is okay. If you're in a 2-quarterback lead, you need Tyrod out there. Okay. Pick up Tyrod. Here's the question, Dwayne, people are going to have. Do I pick up Mark Ingram? Because he had all those carries, gets in the end zone. My response to that would be, when are they ever going to have this game script again where they're, burying a crappy team? And if they're behind, is that when we're going to see Johnson, Lindsey, Burkhead?
I think you're just going to see them all the time. Number one, they led this game on 78% of the plays. I would take a wager, not to challenge anyone, but just friendly wager. I would take a wager with anyone in the chat room. The Texans will not lead any other game this season for 78% of plays. It's not going to happen. It was the flukiest, wildest, perfect storm of crap, for this game to work out this way. They're not going to lead games this often. And when that happens, Mark Ingram's not going to be worth anything. If you own Mark Ingram for some weird reason, do whatever you can to trade him. You probably still won't be able to, but it's a 4-way committee in an offense that also has a quarterback that runs, and an offense that also sucks, with a coach that pronounced analytics as analytics. So I don't really want anything to do with the team. I would also sell high on Brandon Cooks. Now, Ian Hartitz, he disagrees with me on that one, and Ian's a very smart guy. He actually likes Brandon Cooks. So he was wide receiver 21 this past week, but I just don't think it's going to be a very good offense. And if I'm a defense, I know all I got to do is just take away Brandon Cooks. And his targets per route run was still 19%, a number that Brandon Cooks has never really been able to get over in his career. So 19% targets per route run on an offense that's really bad. I doubt that Brandon Cooks gets to 1,000 yards this season. I think he's probably more like an 800-yard, 3 to 4 touchdown player. This could actually be one of his ceiling games of the season.
In Indianapolis, here's another fun one. We talked all offseason about JT not being involved in the passing game, and through 1 week, I'll admit we were kind of wrong. Taylor was targeted 7 times, which was second most on the team to Nyheim Hines' 8. He even saw a target in the red zone, which for him could be huge for his ceiling going forward. So let's talk about JT. Let's talk about what we saw with an kind of immobile Wentz and this team that just apparently doesn't want to throw to any of their wide receivers.
Yeah. So Carson Wentz, 5.8 ADOT, but still almost took him 3 seconds on average to throw the ball, which was just weird. But yeah, with Jonathan Taylor, he's not running enough routes. I mean, they're okay, 40%, handled 60% of the rushing attempts, but he got 24% of the targets. How did that happen? Well, it's because 37% of the time he was in a route, they targeted him. So what I immediately look for when I see a number like that is I go dig in and I'm like, okay, how many designed passing plays did he get? How many times was Jonathan Taylor the first read? So in the NFL, the average for a first read for a running back, meaning the first place the quarterback's going with the ball, is 37%. That was the average over the last 2 seasons. So if you look at Jonathan Taylor, and again, this is where like the nuance comes in and why it's hard to just have like a formula that just like spits out everything perfectly, because there's so many different factors. But if you look at Jonathan Taylor and you look at the way they handled him this week, 3 of his passes, Drake, were on screenplays. So screenplays are design plays specifically one was on a screenplay, 3 were on play action. The screenplay was a play action pass as well. So they were doing different things to create space just to the running back instead of the receivers, which is just an interesting twist, right, on play action and how it can work, because not only sucks linebackers, down to hit behind receivers, it can suck them inward, right? And then you get your back on the outside and you get the edge with your blockers. So there's different ways that you can use play action. The biggest news for me here, Drake, is no Marlon Mack. You don't have to worry about a third back. That's huge. When you got to deal with a third back, even if it's just 10%, it's a pain in the ass. It's a real killer, because every one of those plays, especially for a guy like Taylor, is if that could be 4 or 5 carries only, but he's a good enough player to break any one of those long. And so you just really want to get all the chances you can at busting a play long. So yeah, JT for me, this is a really positive thing. So he isn't getting the routes that we wanted, but I do think it's very positive that they're designing so much stuff for him. And there's just not a receiver, man, that's saying, hey, I'm the alpha, give me the ball. I mean, targets per route run for these receivers, Michael Pittman, 6%. Oh, my God, that's vomit. Zach Pascal, 9%. Paris Campbell, 6%. Cut Paris Campbell. I know I said he was a late-round pick. Cut his dumb ass. 17% to Jack Doyle, but only in a route 50% of the time. Mo Alley Cox, 5%. So, I don't know. Part of this is probably Carson Wentz getting used to the offense, getting the chemistry going with the receivers. But it really looks like this looks similar to Detroit. It looks like an offense where you potentially have a lot of the passing work running through the backs.
Yeah, and that offensive line is real beat up, and they were below average in rushing yards per attempt, only 3.7. You'd think if they had their normal line, they'd be above NFL average, and just a little, something to think about as they get some guys back healthy later on. Keeping on moving here. Oh boy, Jacksonville. Do we have to do this? The Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence's debut. Well, we can talk about James Robinson and Carlos Hyde, because Hyde's getting some run for sure. And then we can touch on the wide receivers, Laviska Shenault, everyone's favorite early, mid-round pick that I shit on. So what do you think here from the Jags?
Yeah, so the Jags, just real quick on Trevor Lawrence. I got quite a few questions. Hey, do I cut Trevor Lawrence for X? I thought Trevor Lawrence actually wasn't that bad, Drake. I mean, yeah, his completion percentage was 55%, but he was pushing the ball down the field. 6.5 yards per attempt, getting the ball out fairly quickly. The biggest issue I had for Lawrence is I just thought he would get more design rushing attempts, and he had 0 scrambles. So he was a player that I thought between scrambles and design rushing attempts, I was probably going to get between 10 and 15% of the teamwork per game. He only ended up with a total of 6% this week. So that's really what hurts him. But let's see. Again, still 1 weekend. To your question on the backs, yeah, I mean, if you drafted James Robinson in the 3rd or 4th round, welcome to the dead zone, buddies. I mean, this is why you don't do it. 63% of the snap, but only 29% of the rushing attempts. So here's what I would say the positive is. You're in a situation where you overdrafted Robinson, but you just have to move on. The good thing is 100% of the 2-minute offense, 67% of the long down and distance, was in a route on 64% of plays. Again, that's good. That's elite. If James Robinson could just start to take carries back away from Hyde and maybe get to that 40 to 50% range of rushing attempts and keep the routes in the 60 to 65% range, now all of a sudden you're in business. So this is what I would say on James Robinson. Yeah, it sucks right now. But Hyde's an older player, Drake. I mean, if I had to put money down, I would say Robinson's got to take over more of the offense as we go. It's early in the season right now. Hyde's healthy. You're probably going to have to deal with him for a little bit. But I think eventually Robinson starts to take over a little bit more and can ultimately probably save some drafters that took him so early. I don't think he's going to be stuck in this RB3 basically territory. I think he's still going to have his RB2 weeks. And if he could get that rolling and start to take a little bit of work from Carlos Hyde, he could be a nice RB2 and still give you some RB1 upside weeks.
Laviska Shenault doing Laviska Shenault things. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 50
12
yards.
12
exactly
yards.
what I said he would do.
Yeah, he's just not that fast. I know we all love him, and he's a rugged player. That's the way I
What are we,
describe
French?
him. Yeah. But I mean, look, it's the industry love Laviska Shenault. And let's be honest. I mean, we're pretty simple as an industry. Oh, a young player. I can get him in the 7th round. They were drafted in the 2nd round last year. I mean, look, and that's not a shot at anyone. I mean, that's been a formula for a long time in fantasy football. It used to be the year 3 receivers. Now it's the year 2 receivers. So, the guy I love here is DJ Chark. I mean, DJ Chark had like almost 200 air yards this week. He and Lawrence just missed a couple plays. I think somebody on this show said DJ Chark would be the best receiver on this team. I can't remember who, but Chark
Probably
is
me.
a guy. Definitely wasn't you.
I hate Laviska Shenault, so I've got to pick somebody.
You do hate Laviska Shenault. But Chark is the guy I like. 46% of the air yards, average depth of target of 16, targets per route run 25%, his actual target rate 24%, 25% of the 3rd down targets. That was first on the team. So Chark is a guy that I really like. Another nice buy low candidate. He did score a touchdown, just enough to probably put him on the radar of whoever the Chark owner is. But man, when you see those kind of air yards, and again, this is a young player. He's only going into his 4th season. He was a dud as a rookie. He had a really good year in his 2nd year. Last year was pretty much banged up the whole year. So if he can just be healthy this year, DJ Chark is the player on this team that I think can stretch the field vertically. He can still run after the catch underneath. He's just got to stay healthy. But I think he can be applied to the football field in the widest variety of ways versus what the other weapons could do.
All right, this is digging deep here. How about James O'Shaughnessy? 10 targets at tight end. If you're dying for something at tight end, is James O'Shaughnessy a thing? Or is that the guy that like you bump into on St. Patrick's Day at the parade?
Dude, 79% of the routes. I mean, and a target on 18% of the routes run. Look, I mean, if I'd rather own him than Austin Hooper right now.
There you go.
I mean, so it's just one of those things where it looks like they're going to use O'Shaughnessy and that he's going to be, involved in the game. So, yeah, I mean, O'Shaughnessy is a guy that you can get for super cheap. I wouldn't expect a ton from him. But, look, normally guys that you're just trying to grab and stream off the waiver wire, their routes are at like 60%. This guy's at 79%. Now, I'm not saying that there are guys like Ian Thomas last year who was in a route like 80%, and I think he had negative 3% targets because he sucks so bad. So, O'Shaughnessy, though, first weekend, 16% of the targets, 18% targets per route run. Yeah, I think that's a positive. And if you're in a league that actually has tight end premium, that could come in really handy.
People want to know what your shirt says, Dwayne. They're always checking it out.
It's from the band American Aquarium. So it was a t-shirt that we got at a concert. So
there you go.
A couple of weeks ago.
Going to see the Foo Fighters tomorrow night. I got my vaccination bracelet that I have to get. It's a party, man.
Look at you. You're already wearing the vaccination bracelet.
You have to go a day early. It's per the band and show your vaccination card and then get this cool Foo Fighters bracelet to wear around for the next day.
We just did a concert like a month ago at Jason Isbell was in town, and he had the same thing. You either had to have your vaccination card or you had to get the rapid test there at the event.
Let's go over to Kansas City where, I mean, really, it's Kansas City. There's Tyreek Hill, there's Patty Mahomes, there's Travis Kelce, and then everybody else, it is what it is. But we know those guys are fantastic. We don't have to bore you with that stuff. I want to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Is he ever going to be a force on the ground? I mean, and with the price that we drafted him at, like, are our hopes always just a little too high with CEH?
Probably, but let's see what happens. 72% of the snaps, 70% of the rush rates, almost 70% of the routes. Like, you can't really ask more than that. Like, that's all good. They just need to throw him the ball a little more, and he needs to play better. So with Edwards-Helaire, at this point, I still think he's a low-end RB2. He was off the field for about half the snaps in the 2-minute offense, and Darrell Williams got those. Darrell Williams also handled all the long down and distance. So Edwards-Helaire is capped a little bit, but again, he's still in an explosive offense. Still has a chance to carve out a little bit more in the passing game. We never expected Edwards-Helaire to be a 15 or 20% target guy because, Mahomes he doesn't like to check down. Remember the first year that Mahomes started after Kareem Hunt had his huge rookie year, and people were going nuts because it's, oh my God, where's all my Kareem Hunt targets? I mean, Mahomes doesn't play that way. Like, he's keeping his eyes downfield, just waiting for Tyreek Hill, like for the defense to give up, and then he's just going to uncork an 80-yarder. He's not going to dump it off, to the back that often. So it's just really a hold situation for me. Jerick McKinnon, though, you can just drop his ass.
Oh, don't mind if I do. How about in Las Vegas? What a crazy finish. A lot of things here. Crazy finish in this game. That was unbelievable. If you didn't see it, look it up on YouTube. Also with this game, how good was that Peyton and Eli simulcast? Did you get to check any of that out?
No, but I want to go back and watch it. I heard it was awesome.
So good. And at certain points, they had Ray Lewis in there. Russell Wilson hung out for the fourth quarter and the overtime. And they're just Peyton's living and dying with every play out there, too. He's like clutching the football. And you could tell he's good friends with Derek Carr. And he really wanted Derek Carr to win, or he just hates the Ravens, maybe. But talking about the Raiders, holy moly. I think Darren Waller's still getting targets tonight. It's out of control. We know he's elite. We know he's their whole passing offense. If you took him in the second round, kudos to you. I want to talk about Josh Jacobs because 10 rushing attempts, 34 yards. He did score 2 touchdowns. But Dwayne, I'm telling you, this guy looks beat up already. It's week 1. He's hobbling off the field.
I think he's dealing with turf toe. I mean, they've talked about him having a toe issue. So, yeah, I mean, dude, Josh Jacobs is just one of these guys that he and Amari Cooper, it's like every time they go down, I feel like they get up really slow. I don't know if you noticed that on the Thursday night game. Amari was super slow to get up multiple times, and it always seems to be that way. But, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see, what happens here with Jacobs. But my guess is they're just giving him a shot, before the game and at halftime. And having him play through it. They may be throwing him under the tent and giving him another one like every 10 minutes. But I did find it interesting if Jacobs is really hurt that much, you would have thought they would have used Kenyon Drake a little more early in the game. Kenyon Drake did end up getting up to 41 snaps where Jacobs was at 45, but there was a point in the game where, man, it would have been all Jacobs. So I don't know. I don't know for sure what's going on with that. It's like Darren Waller's great. Brian Edwards showed a little bit, at the end, still rotating, Edwards, Ruggs, Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones popping on the field some, very annoying. But if you look at Derek, Derek Carr dropped back to pass. So I haven't even done the Raiders yet. So this is me on the fly without having my spreadsheet open. What we got? We got 43 divided by 65. So 66% routes per drop back for Brian.
I was told there would be no math.
Yeah. Well, there's just on your iPhone math. So 66% of the routes. And now Ruggs was probably similar, but I know he left the game for just a little bit. He was at 58%. So these guys aren't startable right now. You need to be, if you're a receiver, to take the spot of another receiver on a roster, you need to be up over 80, 85, 90% of the routes. And so Brian Edwards just isn't there, but he did post a 72.9 grade, which is green. That's good. On via Pro Football Focus, he had an overall grade of 74.1, which was way better than Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs' receiving grade for the game was a 59.1. So Henry Ruggs got a D. Brian Edwards, the way this scale works, is more like a B. So that's good. So we'll just have to see what happens with that. I have this tool open, so whatever you want to ask me, if there's anything else about the Raiders.
Yeah, F the Raiders. I don't care. I always like when they lose because I think Gruden's a fool. How about another West Coast team, the Los Angeles Rams? And boy, oh boy, Matty Stafford gets there. And I'm playing with all these new fun PFF tools here. Number 1 in the league after 1 week in explosive play percentage. Number 2 in the NFL in passing yards per attempt. Number 3 in the league with passing yards after contact per completion. So to me, it just seems Matt Stafford not only loves Cooper Kupp, but likes throwing the ball down the field. You, though, seem to have found something with their pace that alerts you and kind of, gets your spidey senses tingling.
Yeah, so efficiency was great. But yeah, the play pace, they only played 52 plays. That's a 2.1 plays per minute. which is right around average. And McVay is typically top 5. So you normally get a lot of games with like 65. And the thing is, I mean, they led on 94% of the plays, though. So when teams get out in front, that can happen. They can slow things down if they feel like, you know what, we really don't need much to beat Andy Dalton. You know, that's probably like behind the play call sheet. They're not even calling plays. They're like, guys, we're playing Andy Dalton. Like, just don't fuck this up. That's probably what they're saying. So I shouldn't do that. Andy Dalton's a TCU guy, local boy. But anyway, yeah, Stafford, man, golly, ADOT 10.9. Do you ever remember an ADOT from Jared Goff of 10.9? Rarely. 2.5 average time to throw, and getting that ADOT, that's like Mahomesy. 11.9 yards per attempt, 29% play action. Matt Stafford is loving this, Drake. Like, this is like, he's got to be thinking, oh my God, I'm in a scheme. And look what this scheme does now that you have a quarterback that can actually uncork the deep throw. Like those play action passes and just drop them back. Okay, boom, 40-yarder. He had 2 40-yard shots, one of them for a touchdown. He connected on both of them. Like, and it's the same play you were seeing in practice that people were putting all over Twitter. You know, you go back, play action, kind of rolling out, and then throw it all the way back over to the other side of the field. Stafford looked phenomenal. This is going to be an elite offense. If you drafted Cooper Kupp and you drafted Robert Woods, he'll get his. You're going to be in great shape. The guy, 2 guys, though, you should be the most excited about on this team besides, obviously, everything we just talked about. Darrell Henderson, man, 94% of the snaps. 67%.
How much do you think that has to do, though, with Sony Michel not knowing the offense?
Sony Michel's been there 3 weeks. I mean, is he an idiot?
That's your words, not mine.
I'm sorry. 6%. I'm done. Like, Sony, like, screw it. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, get your shit together. We were really look, that's a miss for me. I thought Sony Michel would be more involved, and he could eventually. I think it's going to take an injury probably to open the door. I mean, we'll see. But 94% of the snaps, look, you could get Sony Michel out there and give him some first and second down carries. Like, that's not that hard. You know what your run play is. You may not want him out there yet, like on long down and distance, blowing a coverage assignment and, you know, getting Matt Stafford hurt. But you could get him out there and let him run the ball between the tackles on first or second down. They didn't want him doing that. It just makes me kind of wonder, like, what's going on with Michel. So, yeah, you can hold Michel. But honestly, look, sometimes you just have to rip the Band-Aid off. You just got to cut his ass. You know, if you're in a small league, don't wait on Sony Michel. Dump him. You can come back for him later. Nobody's going to pick him up. That's the beauty. He didn't score any points. Nobody's going to pick up Sony Michel in a lot of these leagues that you guys are dealing with. If you're in a deeper league like the FFPC, we can't release Sony Michel because as soon as you do, he actually will be picked up in that kind of format. And he's still a valuable handcuff. But, man, Henderson looks like the dead zone play of the year. If this offense is this good and he stays healthy, dude, Drake, he's an RB1 now. He's going to be an RB1. Like, this 67% of the rushing attempts, 79% of the routes. Only target on 4%, but just like we talked with Zeke, when you're in a route 80%, they may not like focus the offense on you because they want to push the ball down the field. But, dude, you could get 10%. You could get 3 balls a game. Long down and distance, 75%. Never have trusted Darrell Henderson in his life in long down and distance, and they did it. 100%. Inside the 5, 100%. Short down and distance, 75%. So Darrell Henderson, if you drafted Darrell Henderson, congratulations. He's playing on a great offense, and right now he's as close to Najee Harris was the top back as far as snaps for the week. Darrell Henderson was second. The other guy, real quick, Tyler Higby, man. This is the other guy. Why tight ends are going to be huge this year. 93% routes. Tyler Higby's been living in the 60% range his whole life. 93%, 24% of the targets, second only to Cooper Kupp. Targets per route run, 23%, second to only Cooper Kupp. I mean, this got 25% of the end zone targets. It's this 33% of his targets came on play action. Tyler Higby is officially passing Logan Thomas in my rankings for the rest of the season. So if I rank tight ends today, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, George Kittle, you can pick between Pitts and Hawkinson, right? But those 2 guys are next. The next guy on the list is Tyler Higby. And he could push past those guys. That's why I'm so excited about tight end this year. There's going to be quite a few good ones.
Everybody, Dwayne, is talking about Austin Eckler not getting any targets this week. It's literally outside of people tweeting snap numbers. It's then followed with, oh, did you know Austin Eckler didn't get a target this week? 15 carries, 57 yards. He did get a rushing score this week. Next week, he gets the Dallas Cowboys. I have a feeling that'll be a little more up-tempo, and he's going to be catching some balls out of the backfield. I can't wait to see that rookie linebacker, Micah Parsons, chasing Austin Eckler around the field. That ought to be fun. So with Eckler, I mean, that's kind of an anomaly, folks. These things happen. I like this Larry Roundtree kid, and I think that's kind of a sharp pickup in some leagues because he's going to get carries. God forbid Eckler goes down. Justin Jackson looked like he got put on ice, and the Chargers receivers. I heard you said Mike Williams sucked during the PFF live stream on Sunday morning, and he came back and dropped an elbow a la Macho Man on you from the top rope.
He did. So that's another one I got to live up to. He got used in a different way. So I mean, I was just a bit I was skeptical of that really happening, just given the way he's been used, and you do need someone to push the boundary. So yeah, I think from now on, right now, Mike Williams is a wide receiver 3, and he gives you some upside, and you can use him. 31% of the air yards led the team, 40% end zone targets led the team, 85% of the routes led the team, even over Keenan Allen, 27% target share tied with Keenan Allen. So yeah, I do think Mike Williams is a valuable asset. As far as Austin Eckler goes, he's just hurt, guys. He's going to be used. He'll be used in the passing game. You just got to look, he's recovering from a hamstring issue. I would not freak out about, if you're going to freak out about anything, it's like, oh my God, is this going to be a reoccurring injury with the hamstring? Is he going to finally get up and get going and turn it loose? And is he going to hurt it again? I'm not worried about Austin Eckler and whether or not he's going to get targets. I do think they will come. I think they just they put a game plan together to really ease him along, get what they needed out of him, but not get him hurt.
The Dolphins went into Foxborough and beat the Patriots in a battle of Alabama quarterbacks, Tua versus Mac Jones. So we saw Myles Gaskin. We kind of got a peek at this backfield that we were worried about would be this 3-headed monster. And we got to see the debut of Jalen Waddle. Without Will Fuller, he comes back this week. Just remember that, folks. So you had Parker, Waddle, and then mix in other guys. And Mike Gesicki is just kind of dead to the world. So what's your overview on the Miami Dolphins offense?
Yeah, another dead zone running back. I got to give a shout out to Jay Moyer, though. He talked about how Myles Gaskin could have 20% of the targets, and I thought it was crazy. Because, why would you target Myles Gaskin 20% when you have Mike Gesicki, you got Devontae Parker, you got Jalen Waddle. They didn't have Fuller last week, but they're going to get him back. So Gaskin went out and immediately had 19% of the targets this week, played on 86% of the 2-minute offense snaps, but only playing half the time. It's the typical Patriots rule. You got to go 50, 30, 20. That's how you split up your running backs. And so this is basically, the Patriots Southeast. And that's how they're going to run it. So with Gaskin, what you need those for him to take over more of the rushing attempts. He's actually really similar to what we saw with James Robinson. It's funny. These two guys that were of similar ilk from last year both really need to take over more of the rushing attempts. I think it's going to be harder for Gaskin than it is going to be for J-Rob because Salvon Ahmed's pretty good. You got Malcolm Brown, who's not really that good, but you got to deal with 2 backs. You got to overcome versus you just got Hyde to deal with in Jacksonville, and Hyde's older. So the good news for Gaskin is he was involved in the passing game. I don't know that I think that target share still holds up over the course of the season when you've got Fuller, you've got Waddle, you've got all these other guys. One thing I'll say about Jalen Waddle, I loved him. Top 30 wide receiver finish in your first game ever. High five. Way to go, Jalen Waddle. We love you on the show. 93% of the routes. Albert Wilson was at 60%, though, and he was the third receiver. So I just wonder, Drake, what's going to happen when Will Fuller comes back? Because last week, Jalen Waddle had 19 snaps out of 12 personnel. Is Jalen Waddle going to come off the field in 12? And I think he could, right? It could be Parker and it could be Fuller. Maybe it's a rotation of all 3. Or is it Waddle staying out there with Fuller and Parker comes off? Or is it, Waddle with Parker and Fuller comes off? I don't know. And maybe it's some mix of those things, but I think there's a chance here Waddle dips down. Where I had Waddle really projected in my in the way I projected his targets was to be in the 70 to 80% routes per drop back. So it would still be okay, but now getting to see a 93%, like gets you super excited. So just something to think about with Waddle, because last week, Albert Wilson only got to 60% of the routes run per drop back. Now, to be fair, the Dolphins led on 79% of the plays. So that also allowed, some of that, to play out that way. Oh, Mike Gesicki, cut him. You can cut him.
Moving on to Minnesota, where I tweeted out Adam Thielen's touchdown regression must be on hold until next week because he had 10 targets, 9 receptions for 92 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. They love him in the red zone. We've talked about it before. They just have plays dialed up for Adam Thielen. He gets open in that area, and it just is what it is, folks. So you can write off Adam Thielen all you want. The guy is still sticking around. Him, Justin Jefferson, obviously good players. The name I want to bring up to you, Dwayne, is KJ Osborne, who had 16% of the targets, 7 of 7 targets, 7 receptions for 76 yards. Was this a function of, hey, we just ran a boatload of plays, they ran 83, and we needed him in the offense? Or do you think he is a sustaining element in the Vikings offense this year?
I don't think he'll be a sustaining element. I think you're going to see more 11 personnel because last year you had 2 really good tight ends. And I say really good, but 2 good tight ends, right? And Kyle Rudolph and then Irv Smith Jr. Kyle Rudolph leaves for the Giants, and then you have Irv Smith Jr. get hurt, with the meniscus tear out for the season. So now your 2 tight ends are Tyler Conklin and Chris Herndon. You're just not going to run as much 12 personnel. That means you're going to need more of a mix of 12 and 11. So now that you're using more 11 personnel, KJ Osborne is the guy getting on the field. So, I mean, he's okay. You would need to be in a really deep format, though, because we know this team, even if they run 11 personnel, they're still going to run the ball plenty, Drake. And they're going to have games where they're only going to throw the ball 17 times. So it's just hard to get excited for someone like Osborne too much when you have 2 elite options in Thielen and Jefferson, and you got an offense that can just go run heavy at any moment. I do think we see more 3 wide receiver sets than what we've seen over the last several years. For the Vikings. Honestly, shame on you, Vikings. Like, how do you not have more receivers on your team? And nothing against KJ Osborne, but you can't just plan on everything going perfectly and just having this run heavy offense the whole time. And it's not just because of injuries. Sometimes you're getting your teeth kicked in, and you need to be able to go out there and have 3 or 4 receivers on the field and try to catch up. I feel like when I look at the way the Vikings, I love their scheme, but when I look at the way they manage their roster, it's like if a game doesn't go a certain way, like they're screwed. Because they just don't have.
Didn't hit on Justin Jefferson.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, but you can't argue with that. They spent the pick and they used it on Justin Jefferson. He was a 1st-round pick. All you can do is spend the pick. But they need to think about how they can be more diverse and win multiple types of games. I watch the Vikings a lot because they have some players on there I really love, and I feel like when they just can't thread the needle perfectly on what type of game it's going to be, they're screwed.
Damien Harris was 3rd in the NFL in carries this week. He had 23 of them for the Patriots. We're often worried about Ramondre Stevenson coming in and stealing the touches. James White still hanging around there. J.J. Taylor, who didn't really even get in the box score this week. Mac Jones's first start, they take the L. There's a lot of guys we want to look at here. What happened in the run game? How did Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar look? They've got 58 tight ends. So let's kind of digest the Patriots offense.
Yeah, so Damien Harris did look really good, but Ramondre Stevenson fumbled early. You were going to see what I just talked about with the Dolphins, the 50-30-20 split, but it ended up being 53-37-7 because Stevens fumbled, earlier in the game. Now, rushing attempts will also come down. I don't expect to see Damien Harris at 74%. I do think, he could approach the 55-60% each week because you don't have to deal with Cam Newton anymore. But I think Stevenson will earn his way back onto the field. I think Stevenson's going to see 20 to 25% of the attempts, 50 to 60% to Damien Harris, 10 to 15% to James White. The good news with Harris is, you drafted him in the 9th round. Your 8th round. You didn't draft him in the 5th round with all the dead zoners. You got a back that's coming in and producing okay numbers for you that you got at a good price. So I think that's a good thing. Also, targeted on 27% of the routes that he ran. That's something we've never seen from Damien Harris. So just something to kind of keep an eye on there. James White, still the primary passing down back, obviously, 100% of the long down and distance. They didn't run the 2-minute offense this past week, but we know James White will own that whenever they go forward. The tight ends, I don't know what to tell you guys. I think Jonnu, I went back and looked. I couldn't ever find anything, but I know I had the games on the whole time, and I was flipping through them, but I was trying to do my research and do pre-writing and all that kind of stuff on Sunday as well. And so I'm pretty sure Smith missed a few plays because of injury in the game. But he was only out there for 45% of the routes. Hunter Henry only out there for 55% of the routes. There's just not a lot you can do with that. I mean, those guys are droppable at this point. If you want to give them another week, you can. But I don't know how we do much with that. That's just, you're never going to want to start a tight end with those numbers. So if you're keeping them on your roster, what you're looking for is next week to see an increase in those data points. I mean, that's worse than O'Shaughnessy. Even if Jonnu Smith is a way better player, he can't overcome being doubled up in routes. Like, it's just too much. It's too much. Jacoby Myers is the number one receiver on the team, even though Nelson Aguilar outscored him in fantasy this week. But Aguilar is a guy that I know he's a potential waiver, but don't put a lot on him. That's like a 2%er, 1%er on Nelson Aguilar. I'm not going to spend a lot of money there.
New Orleans had quite the game script against the Packers. They just dominated them. They led from bell to bell. We were wondering how Jameis would look. Didn't throw a lot of passes, but the ones he threw, most of them ended up in the end zone. 5 touchdown passes for famous Jameis. Alvin Kamara, 72% snap share. He had 20 carries, splitting time with Tony Jones, 20% target share, 18 PPR points for Alvin Kamara. So not the biggest day that Alvin Kamara will ever have if you drafted him 2nd, 3rd, 4th overall, but hey, you're never going to be upset at 18 PPR points.
Well, the key on that is he didn't play in the 4th quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So had he got everything that he was averaging until, whenever he came off the field, and that's essentially when Tony Jones got most of his work. So Kamara barely played, I think, like a couple of snaps in the 4th quarter. 64% of the rushing attempts was where he would have been through the plays that he had, through the snaps he had played, right? 64% of the rushing attempts to Alvin Kamara. I don't think he's ever topped 45% in his career. 22% of the targets. Alvin Kamara, if he gets that, he's going to be Christian McCaffrey-like. Like, he's going to be the RB2 or RB1. He's going to be better than Dalvin Cook if he gets that workload. So anyway, it's Alvin Kamara. You're going to play him no matter what. But what I'm telling you is I saw several drafts, and I got to do it a few times. That dude fell down to pick 5, 6, 7, and you could have the RB1 overall that you got at a little bit of a discount.
They didn't have to throw the ball, so, we don't have to worry about the wide receivers. Callaway's the only guy you want to own there. But where I want to go is to the tight end, because you're going to see a lot of waiver wire articles. My good friend Andrew Erickson put out one on PFF.com, and people are touting Juwan Johnson of the Saints. He also, by the way, on Yahoo has wide receiver eligibility, and he only ran 10 routes, but he saw 4 targets on them. You, in your utilization report article at PFF.com, say Troutman is the tight end to target. So let's break that down.
Yeah, Troutman's in a route on 72% of the plays. He was targeted 26% of the time. His targets per route runs 28%. Juwan Johnson was on the field for 40% of the routes, target 16%, targets per route run 30%. It's pretty simple. I mean, one guy's out there 32% more of the time whenever the team's passing. So while a lot of people will chase those Juwan Johnson touchdowns, and in a deeper format, like, fine, if you want to roster Juwan Johnson, go ahead. Just don't do it over Adam Troutman. Troutman should be the guy that you add first. He was out there plenty, saw plenty of targets, and his ceiling's just going to be higher because of that. Juwan Johnson needs to earn more and more and more and more playing time, which could happen, but that's going to be a wait and see. You cannot pick up Juwan Johnson right now and start him. Like, you just can't. Like, and I own Juwan Johnson, I don't know, like I'm 40% of my teams because I play in 20 player rosters and his tight end premium. So he's a guy I took a lot, in the late rounds. But even in those leagues, I'm not starting Juwan Johnson. And you play 2 flex players in those leagues, but I'm going to keep him and I'm going to see what happens. What I was hoping to see from Juwan Johnson, I would have been happier to see Juwan Johnson score 0 touchdowns and have 72% of the routes. Then we would be singing a different song, but that's not the case. So it's definitely Adam Troutman season, not Juwan Johnson season.
It's not good in New York for either team, but we'll start with the Giants. The Giants, on Sunday had 3 rushing yards before contact. Welcome back, Saquon Barkley. This line is terrible. The play caller is terrible. First downs gained rushing. The New York Giants had 3. That was 30th in the NFL. They're just, and you could think, maybe they stacked the box to try to stop Saquon Barkley. Nope. Only 5 plays the entire game do they see more than 8 people in the box. This team is just, the line is bad. The quarterback stinks. The play caller stinks. The only redeeming quality I see on this whole team is Sterling Shepard of all people, and they get the football team on Thursday night.
Yeah. And I worry about Barkley's workload on a short week. It's like, what are we going to do with it? But look, you drafted Barkley to really be giving you some punch in the 3rd and 4th, 5th weeks of the season. And so that's still all intact, so you just got to remember that. There's not a lot to look at here, Drake. Sterling Shepard by far. We talked about him on the show as being a guy that, like, look, if you got aggressive and took Rondell Moore and Elijah Moore and Jalen Waddle all say back to back to back in your draft as options to be your wide receiver 3, Sterling Shepard was a great guy you could come back with after all of those and say, hey, here's my week 1 starting wide receiver 3. And that's exactly what he's doing here. Now, is he going to stay healthy? I don't know. I mean, he plays 10 or 12 games a season. But 25% of the targets, 21% targets per route run, average depth of target of 10. He's Daniel Jones's favorite target right now. I do think Kenny Golladay is going to get better. Kenny Golladay, I do still believe, is a buy low because people draft. He fell so far in drafts at the end of draft season. I got him in the 9th round in a draft in the FFPC. It just got to a point where I was like, I'm not passing Kenny Golladay in the 9th round. I've never been a 2nd or 3rd round Kenny Golladay guy like I saw, back in the days with the Lions, and a lot of people jumped on it. But I do think Kenny Golladay is worth probably a 5th round pick, and I was getting him in the 9th. So Golladay could be a guy that you go kick the tires on. Yes, it's a terrible offense, but if you can get him for cheap enough, it could still be worth it.
How did you put up with Jason Garrett for all those years? This guy's terrible.
I know, man. What's funny is there was a time, Drake, when Jason Garrett was one of the past heaviest coaches in the league. Whenever he first came on the scene, Romo was still a young quarterback. I mean, dude, like, they were throwing the ball all over the field, doing all sorts of stuff. But I think it just happens to these coaches, eventually you kind of get in a rut, what you know, and think about it. Just like anything in life, you get in a football game and emotions happen and all this stuff occurs and people harken back to like what they know, what they believe, like, oh my God, my back's in the corner. What am I going to do? So I just think there's some of that going on with Jason Garrett. I don't think he's a dumb person by any means.
He went to Princeton.
Yeah, he went to Princeton and he played quarterback in the NFL. He's just got something in him that's misguided as far as to how he really thinks about certain elements, of the game. And I sit here saying that like as a fan, and we talk about fantasy football. Jason Garrett knows more about his pinky about football than like anybody here and all of us combined listening, will ever know. But then it's about how you apply it. And then comparing you to your peers. And that's where it gets difficult because you just see other coaches doing more innovative things and really just creating more for their offense. And I think Garrett's smart enough to figure that out. But yes, there were some painful times here.
We talked about the Giants only running for 3 yards before contact. Well, this next team did them a whole yard better, and they share the same stadium. It's the Jets, 4 yards rushing before contact. It might not get any better this week. They just lost Mekhi Becton, their big left tackle. This offensive line sucks. The Disney princess, Zach Wilson, is going to be running for his life. These 2 running backs, well, there's 3, but the 2 that, really got most of the work here, Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman. I happen to own both of them on a team because I lost Gus Edwards and I was just kind of scrambling for anybody at the position. And I started Tevin Coleman this week and I still got the W. I think I might drop both of them. I mean, how can you play anybody in this backfield, Dwayne? It's a disaster.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Ty Johnson at least played over half the snaps, got all the long down and distance, got all the 2 minutes. So if I had to pick one thing I wanted in this offense, it would be the guy getting all the passing down work, and that's still Ty Johnson right now. But I think Tevin Coleman and Michael Carter are both. You can cut them. You can cut all three of these backs. I mean, the only way.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know your league, you know how deep it is, you know what you're dealing with. So I would say you can cut them all. But if you're in a certain kind of format where you're like, if there's one I wouldn't cut, it'd probably be Johnson. Carter's still the one that you're thinking, man, down the road, can he? These other two guys are so bad at some point, you're really just like, look, here, Michael Carter, just go. But there's so many other problems, like you said, with Becton getting hurt, et cetera, et cetera. So with the receivers, man, so Corey Davis came through big, 29% of his targets came on play action, which is something that we talked about, 34% of the air yards, 100% of the end zone targets, 21% of the targets overall, had a really good wide receiver 5 week. So good job, Corey Davis. I have to say, Drake, I'm still a little concerned though, just because the offense looks so bad. Like everything's gone wrong. You lose Becton, you had the defense's issues, and I just worry. And now you get Crowder back. He's going to be in competition, for targets. So it's funny, as well as Corey Davis played, like there's this little part of me that's like, man, do I just sell Corey Davis high now? Like, because this offense, like, can it be any better than this? And the answer is maybe it's not better than this, but he still gives you 15 to 20 points a game, and you got him in the 6th, 7th, 8th round of a draft. He's going to be fine. Which is weird because he's a player I loved and he smashed in week 1. So it's not normal really to kind of feel like that about a player that hit for you that you were really high on and trying to really help others, get on the train with you and get him at the discount that you could in drafts. Elijah Moore, just be patient, guys. Look, he was out there for 85% of the routes. We're going to have to see what happens with Jamison Crowder this week. But right now, Elijah Moore is a player that I want to hold if I can. If you're in a really small league, you play in an 8-team league, and there's somebody sitting on the wire like a Mike Williams. Okay, I get it. You can cut, Elijah Moore, for a Mike Williams. Christian Kirk, I know, is the one that Matt Lawrence is asking about in the chat. Elijah Moore versus Christian Kirk. I think that's a really good one. I think that's pretty close. And I think Drake. I could be wrong, but I think I lean to Christian Kirk a little bit here just because I think he's in a better offense. I know that he's got that slot work. Right now, Elijah Moore's got Crowder coming back. I don't know for sure. How's that going to impact him? This offense has more question marks. You could argue, well, Elijah Moore maybe is the better talent. We've seen Christian Kirk for years. Okay, I can't really argue with that. So you could be dealing with more upside as far as the player and their trajectory. But if I got to account for all the factors, I mean, I don't know what your thought is, Drake, but I think I kind of lean to Christian Kirk. It is close, but I do think I lean to Christian Kirk in that scenario. And if I had to just say the biggest reason is I just think the Cardinals offense is a million times better than the Jets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and he's got the size, and this is a team that's going to score more. I mean, how many touchdowns realistically are the Jets going to score this season? I mean, are they going to be in the red zone a lot? Like, no, not really. We had another question. What kind of players would you be targeting in a trade for Corey Davis? So if I'm shipping out Corey Davis, I mean, it's going to be tough because your league mates probably aren't stupid. They know the Jets are a dumpster fire, and they can just be like, it's 1 week. But I mean, the line's bad. I mean, what can you get back? I mean, you probably don't want another receiver. I mean, what kind of running back are you going to get for Corey Davis? I don't know. What's somebody going to give you? Sony Michel? That's the kind of player you're looking at there?
I think you're going to get a lot more than that for Corey Davis. Most people don't think about all the things we're thinking about, and that's what I have to remind myself. Most people will just see Corey Davis, wide receiver 5. I don't have a wide receiver. Yeah, I'll trade. That's what most people do. I mean, I don't know, a running back, I would do it for Darrell Henderson. I would trade Corey Davis for Darrell Henderson right now. If you could peel Darrell Henderson away from somebody, I would do it. If you could get, I mean, you're obviously not going to get, the DeAndre Swift. You're not going to get who else, Drake? I'm thinking I don't really want to move him for Myles Gaskin. I don't really want to move him for James Robinson either. On those versus those two players, I probably just hold on Corey Davis. And maybe that's because he was kind of my shot that I called.
I don't think people even give you that for him, to be honest. because he's got the stink on him of not working out in Tennessee. Now he's on the Jets. People covet running backs. They know wide receivers.
I think, you could get. He's the wide receiver 5 for the people. Dude, have you seen how much people overreact? Like, it's insane.
I am on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. Yes,
it's insane. Like, you can. I bet you. Now it depends on their roster. I'm pretty sure you could get J-Rob or Myles Gaskin in a heartbeat today for Corey Davis.
Our good buddy Kevin Tompkins says he would Javonte Williams for Corey Davis. I'd do that. You better call a detective and have him call the police station in that town and see if there was a murder. If somebody will give you Javonte Williams for Corey Davis.
Yeah. What's funny is had Becton not gotten hurt, I would have said no to that trade because Davis looked great and everything was there for Davis. You know, Davis had a bad rookie season. Like, we went through it all a couple of episodes ago. Like, to me, he was the sleeper of this offseason based on all the metrics, all the data, everything. He had a little bit of misfortune in the way that his career's worked out, and it looks like it could kind of go that way again. But, I mean, he is by far the top target on the team, and he was still able to punch in 2 touchdowns. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't like him. I was just thinking, you know, is it time to sell high? If you can get something really good, I would not give Corey Davis away. And I love Javonte Williams, but there's also a chance that we've just got to deal with Melvin Gordon all year long.
All right, folks, pull up a chair, get some popcorn, get a fresh beer, because we're talking Eagles at this point. Nobody in the league had more rushing yards before contact than the Eagles, 104. That means the offensive line's healthy. They're blocking. They're doing great. Led the league in RPO snaps this past week. Lowest ADOT also in the NFL. We talked about Matthew Stafford on the high end. Jalen Hurts, I believe, was like 4.7, Dwain. Everything was very schemed up for Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts looked great. He was very point guard-esque out there. And you can tell everything was schemed up because their first 3 plays were for Quez Watkins. They ran the same play to the left, then they came back and ran it to the right, and then they ran another play for him. So this is good coaching. Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen had a good plan, and it helps that Atlanta stinks. But the Eagles looked like a team that knew what they were doing, and they knew how to maximize their talent. And that talent involves now Kenny Gainwell, who we'll talk about, who had a lot of opportunities in short down and distance in the 2-minute drill. Devonta Smith, hopefully you took our advice and you picked him up. And who was the quarterback that we wanted everybody to take in the 8th, 9th, 10th round? Jalen Hurts. And guess what, folks? He goes out and crushes it week 1. So just a great, great week for Philadelphia. Tough week now. You got San Francisco coming into the link. But if they can keep scheming things up, I mean, there's plays to be had. And we'll see how good that offensive line holds up against San Fran.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit most of the stuff, to be honest. Hurts looked great. I know the ADOT was low, 3.6, and like you said, they're really scheming things up. The big thing you need to know with Jalen Hurts is 13% of the design rushing attempts and 7% scrambles. That's 20%. 20%. When you're 20% of your team's rushing, again, I don't need to say it over and over. That's the cheat code at at quarterback, and you're going to be in really great shape. The biggest takeaway for me, Miles Sanders looked okay. I know we've had several Kenny Gainwell questions, so I guess we can go ahead and jump in.
How much fab for Gainwell?
Yeah, Gainwell, I really like him. So, you leapfrog Boston Scott, who's a player that he's not awesome, but they like him. And Boston Scott's been a good player. And so Kenneth Gainwell has already leaped him, got half of the snaps in long down and distance, got 100% of the snaps in the 2-minute offense. So here's what I like about that situation. When a running back can come in, and this happened with DeAndre Swift last year, early in the season, remember, it was who? Adrian Peterson playing on the early downs. Kerryon Johnson was getting out there. Kerryon's knee did what Kerryon's knees do. It was just him and Peterson. But the thing that we noted was, man, DeAndre Swift is out there on the 2-minute offense. He's out there in the long down and distance. That's the hardest spot to get your coaches to trust you. Once you have that, just taking over the rushing duties, that's easier. That's the easier part of the equation. And so the beauty is Gainwell has already done the hard part. Now, if Sanders falters, if Sanders fumbles, if Sanders sucks, which Sanders looks fine and the offensive line looks really good. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to Sanders, but there's a lot of paths to Gainwell picking up more value, or it could just be he's starting to push to even things out, with Miles Sanders. So for Kenny Gainwell, yes, I really like him a lot. He is, someone, and again, this depends on your league size. You guys know all this stuff. I typically play in these deeper leagues. In that kind of league that I play in, it'll take 15% of FAAB to pull Gainwell. In a smaller league, you can probably get him for like 5, 7, 8, 9, 10%, somewhere in there. You know your league better. And it depends. You go look at everybody's rosters and you look at who else is all on the waiver wire. You immediately notice a ton of names at the top of your waiver wire that we should all notice. Then you can get Kenny Gainwell for nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? In the leagues I go look at, Kenny Gainwell will be the top. Kenny Gainwell, in the leagues I'm in, Kenny Gainwell won't be on the list. So that just tells you.
Playing the league with me, Kenny Gainwell got drafted.
Exactly. So, Gainwell is a player I like. I think he can give you a little bit of value potentially in a flex if you had to have it, because he does have that 2-minute offense and he could grow his role. Lots of paths to value for Kenny Gainwell. And just real quick, Devonta Smith, man, 95% of the routes, 23% of the targets, 55% of the air yards, 50% of the end zone targets, 43% of the third down targets. This is Jalen Hurts' dude. Jalen Reagor, you got lucky. You made one play with your legs, buddy, but only 71% of the routes, 20% of the targets. I still don't. You watch the games. I still don't feel it with Reagor.
No.
I went back and watched as much of the game as I could. I think this is Devonta Smith's offense, and I think Dallas Goedert, even with Zach Ertz being in the mix, now he's got a hamstring issue potentially.
Ertz was playing more than him before that, to be honest.
Was
the hamstring injury slowed Ertz down.
Yeah. Well, I think it's Goddard and Smith are the two guys that I would want to own. Reagor, I'm still not that excited about. 71% of the routes, come on, man. I'd need to know you had more pop, for me to be willing to go at 70% of the routes.
All right. Everybody was talking in Pittsburgh about the Steelers coming from behind and shocking the Bills. It was the debut of Pittsburgh's first-round running back, Najee Harris. You might have selected him in the second round of your fantasy draft and expected big things. Well, the usage was certainly there. Harris played every single snap. Unfortunately, his offensive line absolutely sucks. Harris ran 16 times for 45 yards, and 38 of those came after contact. Zero room to run for Najee Harris. So let's talk about Najee. We'll talk about their trio of very good wide receivers. It was a tough contest. Buffalo's a good team. Let's give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. I only need to know one thing. Najee Harris had 100% of snaps, 80% of the rushes. I don't care. You're going to be okay. Yeah, it's a situation. So 58 plays, only 2.2 minute plays per minute, but still 66% pass, 34% run for the Steelers. The under the center experiment was kind of short lived. They were in shotgun 91% of the plays, but Matt Canada did triple up their play action. They were in play action on 34% of the plays. Ben was around 10% last year. So that's a good thing for Roethlisberger. Hopefully we'll get some more efficiency out of that, because Ben he didn't look that great, Drake. And so I'm a little worried. You got some low play totals going here. We know they do want to run the ball a little bit more. They couldn't in this game because they knew they needed to really keep the pedal down against Buffalo, which can be a formidable, not just be one. They are a formidable offense that you got to deal with. Mm-hmm. So the good news on Chase Claypool, 82% of the routes. Last year, he was down in the high 60s to low 70s and still doing what he did. Didn't come through, necessarily this week. Only 16% of the targets. I think he'll be okay. The biggest takeaway here in the receiving course, Deontay Johnson's the dude. I mean, he's it. He just has to stay healthy. This is going on and on and on. This is pretty much every week when he plays and he's healthy. 32% of the targets, 31% targets per route run. His low ADOT is intact despite the way that they're running the offense. A little bit of concerns that we had. 30% of his targets coming on play action, so that should help him down the stretch. Juju, 57% of his targets on play action. Claypool, 60% of his targets on play action. These guys have got to be thinking, what the hell? I got 0 play action targets last year.
They actually have a running back this year.
Yeah. Deontay's the dude. Juju Smith-Schuster, 100% of the routes. Everybody wants to say Juju's dead and that it's Chase Claypool. I mean, Claypool's playing, 20% less snaps or passing plays than what Juju Smith-Schuster is playing. Juju even showed a little bit of juice in that game. So, just looking at the Steelers offense, I want to see another week of this, but I am concerned. about the number of plays. If it stays low like that, and if there's any chance that they can get in games where they run the ball more, one of these guys is going to be the odd person out. They're going to be the odd player out every week. So it could get a little dicey here because these guys all drafted in the top 7 rounds of fantasy drafts. Deontay went in the 4th or the 5th. Claypool usually went the end of the 5th, early 6th. These are in the competitive leagues I play in, maybe a little bit later in some of the different home drafts. But then you had Juju typically going in the 7th round. So all pretty much like back-to-back rounds where you're picking Steelers receivers. I've seen enough right now that I'm concerned that they're not all 3 going to pay off, but we'll see. Let's get another data point next week.
2 things I love. Number one, we've got guys in our chat room, and the chat room is on fire tonight, bringing up former offensive line coaches. So we're dropping some great knowledge. And when Mike Munchak gets shout out in your fantasy football chat, you know you're doing things right. And we're 2 hours into the show now, and we still have well into the triple digits of live viewers. So we thank you folks for hanging out with us tonight as we barrel through the NFL. And we're up to Seattle, where new OC Shane Waldron was somebody that Dwain was very keen on in the preseason, and the efficiency for Russell Wilson didn't stop there. You know, is DK Metcalf getting things done? Tyler Metcalf with a pair of touchdowns. Chris Carson now solidifying his role with Rashad Penny going down again to miss some time. So everything's kind of just looking up for Seattle. Just, hey, what's not to like about the Seahawks, Dwain?
Yeah, it looks really good. My one concern is 54 plays, another 2.2 play per minute team, which is not where we want to be. Shane Waldron, I wanted to see this team run 70 plays, not 54. At 54 plays, we're going to deal with the same crap we've always dealt with. Okay, 5 targets to DK, 5 targets to Metcalf. To Lockett. Did they happen to catch 4 of them with 2 of them going for 80 yards, for a touchdown? We're kind of stuck in the same spot right now, 1 game in. Now, again, they led for 83% of the plays. So they never trailed in the game. So those things can come into play. But I just, Waldron comes over from McVay. McVay is typically in that top 5-6 in plays, per minute. And so I'm definitely watching that. If that does not go up, people are not going to Metcalf's not going to pay off on a 2nd round value if these plays don't go up. If they do go up, Metcalf can absolutely crush that 2nd round value. But we don't want to live on those 4 catch games that have to hit huge plays to win. Even though, if you had to pick one quarterback that can enable that in the league, it is Russ Wilson. 10.9 ADOT, 11 yards per attempt. That's exactly the same as what we just talked about with Stafford. Same offense, right? 12% of the designed rush plays, 7% scrambles. So another quarterback getting you 20% of the team's rushing attempts on the ground out of the gate. And by the way, this one's a badass passer. So Russell Wilson, you're in great shape. 11% sack rate, that's a little high. Another thing to keep an eye on. Man, Chris Carson, love it, Drake. 78% of the snaps, 64% of the rushing attempts, 66% routes. Dude played 100% of the long down and distance. Chris Carson's an RB1. Finished RB15 this week. If he keeps those passing down duties in this offense, man, we've been underdrafting him. I don't care if he's old. I don't care about any of those things. They paid him, and he plays in a good offense. Chris Carson's probably going to outperform his ADP, assuming he doesn't get hurt. And like you said, Penny's out with a calf strain, so you could see Alex Collins. If you're in a really deep league, Alex Collins, I didn't even put that in the column. I probably need to go back and add it. Alex Collins is a guy that in super deep formats, cheap ad, you can get him, for, min bid. Just throw him on there because all of a sudden Chris Carson gets hurt this week. Guess who is the starting running back the following week? Alex Collins would probably be your starter. And we do know Chris Carson has a tendency to get dinged up. Nothing really to add. Kind of already talked about the receivers when I talked about Russ. I think somebody asked earlier about Gerald Everett and Will Disley. Started off kind of hot. Gerald Everett was out there in a route doing his thing, played 100% of the passing downs on that first drive. I tweeted that out there, and then Matthew Berry retweeted it, saying, "Hey, we told everybody, Gerald Everett would be something." So I didn't want to burst Matthew's bubble and draft and send something about what happened on the second drive. I just left it. Waited.
Yeah, he saw 2 targets. He caught them both.
To write the column. Yeah, so it ended up being a split. Route 62% for Everett, 66% for Disley. they're kind of, they're just eating into each other's production. So for now, not really a need to own either one of the players. You can move on. Much rather own Adam Troutman. Maybe even, O'Shaughnessy, I don't know. Like, that's where it gets a little dicey because these guys are close to him. And I like Everett's talent more than I like a guy like O'Shaughnessy. But for sure, Adam Troutman, I would own over either one of these guys.
You know who I don't like? Ronald Jones.
He's the starter. He's the starter, man. He's going to be the starter this week.
Yeah, give me a break with this nonsense. 4 carries for 14 yards. If you've listened to The Hustle for the last, 3 years, you've heard me say how crappy Ronald Jones is. He's just not good. He doesn't hold on to the football. He's splitting time with Leonard Fournette. We've got Gio Bernard there. Gio's not quite healthy. Once I think Gio gets in the mix, I think he'll fully take over that passing role. He didn't have that last week. Obviously we didn't see him till later in the game. But I mean, what do you say for the rest of this squad here? Godwin, Evans, Brown, Gronk. They're all going to get theirs. And Gronk, and you wrote in the utilization report, doesn't have to play tight end, doesn't have to play left tackle as he did in the beginning of last year. So now he can actually go out and run routes as he did this week, 74% of the routes. And, he's a thing. Rob Gronkowski, if he's running that many routes, is going to be a tight end one because he's going to score double-digit touchdowns and he's probably going to catch 5-6 balls a week. You don't need me to tell you that Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown are good.
I don't think you guys need me to tell you anything else unless somebody has a question on the Bucs. I think I covered it pretty well on Twitter on Thursday. I've covered it on the pods with PFF several times too. So there's really nothing here. I mean, Gio's taking all the long down distance and 2-minute snaps. If you own Leonard Fournette, I advise on a sell high. The window's probably gone because today Arian says that Rojo's going to start this next game, which we knew. We knew they're just going to come back and turn this into a big jumbled up mess. And you just don't really want to be a part of it. The only way you end up with value here is through multiple injuries. And even if there are multiple injuries, we don't know that they won't just, give Keyshawn Vaughn more work. I mean, they like using the multiple backs. I had my
dynasty team.
Yeah. So I don't really want any part of the Bucs backfield. If I could trade Leonard Fournette high, I would absolutely get anything I could get, for Leonard Fournette, right now. Now, don't shoot yourself in the foot if you don't even have another RB2 and you're kind of having to use him for now. I mean, I trust you to understand the situation and, you got to have the context of how to best handle it.
Not the greatest debut for Julio Jones in Tennessee. 6 targets, 3 receptions, 29 total yards. This was a disaster with a capital D for the Titans here. I mean, they've had COVID issues. They've had COVID issues for 2 years, it seems, with the Titans at this point. Tannehill, he ran a little bit. He got in the end zone with his legs. It's Derrick Henry. If you're not, if it's not the right game script, you're not getting anything out of him. 17 carries, 58 yards. So he crushed you. AJ Brown, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 49. Thank God he got in the end zone for you, but this was just awful. The Titans look bad, Dwayne.
Yeah, they look bad, but I expect them to get better. I mean, I know we all immediately look at, Arthur Smith's gone and everything fell apart. Well, I mean, Arthur Smith's offense sucked, week 1 too. So let's give it a week. It is week 1. This is one that I just kind of chalk up to let's not overreact to it. Derrick Henry, still had 85% of the rushing attempts. He hasn't been the passing down back in forever, so it's really nothing new to us. They just haven't been in many scripts where they're getting their asses kicked this bad to where it really hurts him. And it's just a reminder this can happen to you with this type of back.
And their defense sucks, mind you. It used to be good. Now it's kind of, it's going to lend them to more of these game scripts if they can't turn it around offensively.
Yeah, AJ Brown's going to be fine. Julio, I don't know. I mean, I faded him. I watched quite a bit of that game. He looked okay. But, man, a lot of contested balls thrown to Julio. I just worry, with Julio that, really the best is gone. It just doesn't look right. And man, talk about a player that I've loved, for forever. And you hate to even hear those words come out of your mouth. But we're talking about fantasy football here. And in fantasy football, could he turn it around this week and be good? Yeah, he could. Absolutely. It's early in the season. You want to get your usage out of Julio now if you drafted him. And honestly, when he has a big week and pops, trade his ass and move along because he's been deteriorating over the last several years. as far as his targets per route run, yards per route run, like all that kind of stuff, has been slowly just kind of leaving.
Final team we're going to cover tonight, the football team. You've got sewage lines breaking on people's heads in the stadium, flooding their beers with piss. It was just, wow. Things went from bad to worse for the football team. It's good if you have Antonio Gibson, 20 carries, 90 yards, but Taylor Heineke is going to take over for the foreseeable future with Ryan Fitzpatrick out with the bad hip. Say goodnight. Terry McLaurin, Humphreys, Dyami Brown, Logan Thomas. I mean, can you even start these guys at this point, Dwayne?
Nope. I mean, you can start them, but you don't really want to. Like Terry McLaurin was normally a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. Now he's a wide receiver 3 with wide receiver 4 downside. Dyami Brown, man, 93% of the routes, 21% of the targets. Oh, yeah. No, I don't even want to play Dyami Brown. Not saying I don't want to roster him. Mm-hmm. And again, this isn't a dynasty show. This is redraft. So in dynasty, you love Dyami Brown, obviously. But yeah, man, the whole offense is downgraded. Everyone. Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, Terry McLaurin, Dyami Brown, Logan Thomas. Taylor Heineke is not who you want under center in an NFL offense. You just don't want it. Could he surprise us all? Yeah, he could. But I think this is a situation, Drake, where they know they have a good defense. They know Taylor Heineke's not really a very good quarterback. They're just going to do what they think they need to win to win a game. And
how
that's
many
the way they're
weeks
going to
until
treat
Cam Newton's playing quarterback for the football team?
Maybe 0. You got to check and make sure he's actually not going to bring COVID to the team, since he likes to, break all the protocols. But yeah, it's honestly, like they should consider that. It's a hip subluxation. Am I saying that?
Subluxation, I believe.
Subluxation. Yeah. So, Fitzpatrick's going to be out a while. So
he's an old dude, man. It's not like he's 21.
Yeah, he is an old dude. He's a tough dude, though. But man, it just sucks because finally we were going to have a quarterback paired with McLaurin that could just help him uncork like some of those deep balls, and now it's all gone. Now you're not excited about starting anybody from the Washington football team.
All right. Lastly, folks, what we'll do is I'm going to run through quickly the waiver wire article that Andrew Erickson put up. If Dwayne, if you want to add anything on how much to add to bid on some of these guys, let me know. Quarterbacks, he's got Jameis Winston as the top ad. Taylor Heineke. I would only add Heineke if you're like a Scott Fishbowl 2 quarterback lead. You have to have somebody. Running backs, Elijah Mitchell. We talked about him a lot to start the show. Kenny Gainwell, Carlos Hyde, Cordarrelle Patterson. Nice name here. Larry Roundtree. That's a name to file away. I like that one. Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler, if you're looking for a wide receiver to fill in for Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Wilson will be stepping up for the Cowboys. I think my favorite guy of the whole group is Sterling Shepard, 15.9 fantasy points per game he averaged with Daniel Jones as his quarterback the last 2 years. Cole Beasley could be out there, still always undervalued. Van Jefferson, Nelson Aguilar. Tight ends, Cole Kmet could be out there. James O'Shaughnessy, we talked a lot about him. Check out the segment on the Jaguars. And if you're looking for a defense this week, Cleveland Browns, New Orleans Saints. The Saints stifled the Green Bay Packers. They get the Jets. So nothing wrong with that. Cleveland, it welcomes the Houston Texans in their home opener.
In Cleveland, you get 2 good matchups in a row. Like the next match, I can't remember who it is, but they get like the Bears or the Giants, some other easy matchup. Maybe it's the Jets, something like that for the Browns. So the Browns, you get back-to-backs if you pick them up. I actually have them on several teams and just stomached the first week deal with the Chiefs.
The Bears next.
Yeah, so there you go. You get 2 weeks in a row out of the Browns. That's why I like prioritizing them this week.
There you go. Anything else here, Dwayne? Or, geez, Louise, we went over 2 hours.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
Love
Thanks,
everybody,
folks.
but we hit everything.
Yeah, folks, it's a town full of losers, and we're pulling out of here to win. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Remember to comment, to like, do whatever you got to do to that damn YouTube page, okay? Follow us on Twitter at FF Hustle, and we will see you next week. Good luck in week 2, and remember to never get out hustled. We'll see you.